Welcome to the December 13th, 2023 Wisconsin Natural Resources Board meeting. The webcast will begin in 3, 2, 1.
Good morning and welcome to our December 13th, 2023 meeting of the Natural Resources Board here in Madison, as well as being connected to a larger audience by Zoom. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance to our great nation. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll now call our hybrid meeting of the Wisconsin Natural Resources Board to order. I have a few administrative reminders to go through, so please bear with. This gets repetitive for some of you. You probably have it memorized by now. I don't. First of all, please turn off any phones or other electronic devices that might interrupt the course of the meeting. And as I mentioned, we'll be connected by Zoom, and we'll have some presenters throughout the meeting coming in over the Zoom apparatus. The meetings are also televised via YouTube, so we welcome very much and thank all viewers who join us. And records of the past meetings are also available for review on the DNR website. You just look under Natural Resources Board Briefs of Action, and you can access those records of previous meetings. Direct public involvement and open, transparent meetings are the foundation of how this board has operated for over 50 years and how we strive to operate today. Our Natural Resource Board discussions and decision makings are transparent to all, and public testimony is very welcome at every regularly scheduled Natural Resource Board meeting. To ensure fair and equal time for all, please limit public testimony to 3 minutes per speaker. We have a light system here and on the podium that will remind you when the caution light goes on yellow, you've got 30 seconds left, and I'd ask you to try and pull your concluding comments together and wrap it up before the red light comes on. If it does, I'll probably provide you a general reminder to wrap it up so that we're not trying to limit anybody's individual input. We just ask people to be concise and to be fair to all, make sure there's time for everyone to have an opportunity to speak to the board. I'd also remind people that speakers can augment their comments. They always want to say a whole lot more, and there's a lot of background information. So we encourage you, if you have that, go ahead and submit that in writing to the board. You can augment your remarks with that, but to try and keep the verbal remarks down to the 3-minute target. Presenters over Zoom, please make sure you're muted and your video is turned off until your item is announced. And for all participants, there can be delays in that Zoom telecast and audio, so we just need to be careful and patient if we tend to talk over one another. Board members, please ask for the floor when you'd like to speak, and be sure to state your name so we get an accurate record. It helps a lot for Ashley and others then to review the record and understand who's making motions and to get an accurate report of our proceedings. I'd like to thank Deputy Secretary Little and your department leadership team again for your support of the board and your commitment to enhance collaboration between the department, the board, and the citizens that we serve. Special thanks to our issue presenters, DNR Information Technology that enable this to happen, Office of Communications, General Counsel, and all the support staff who make these meetings possible. Your time is very valuable, and we appreciate your support. I also like to individually single out Ashley Bissell. Ashley is the administrative assistant to the board, and she is the primary point of contact for the public in making arrangements to attend, testify, submit information to the board. Oftentimes people know Ashley only by computer address or phone number or voice, and this is an opportunity to connect a name and a voice with a face and a person. So I always like to single Ashley out. She's doing a great job and we appreciate it very much. And lastly, I'd like to thank all employees, citizen volunteers, and conservation partners of the Department of Natural Resources for your continued and tireless work to protect and enhance our natural resources and to serve the citizens of our great state. Ashley, please call the roll.
Todd Ames,
Here.
Paul Burke,
Here.
Douglas Cox,
Here.
Patty Schuckner,
Here.
Robin Schmidt,
Here.
Bill Smith, and
Present.
Marcy West.
Here.
Okay, I'll recognize we've got all members present and we have a quorum to proceed. Secretary's remarks. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair, there are not.
Okay. And then in that case, I'd like a motion to approve or amend the agenda, please.
This is Robin. I would move to approve the agenda.
Got a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second to approve. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We have an agenda. Thank you. First item on the agenda is the consent agenda. We have a number of items listed under that. I'll read through them and in the end, we'll want to know if you want to remove any of those from the consent agenda for further discussion. So you can think about that as I go through this. Looks like it's going to take a little while. I'm glad I have some water here. Under consent agenda, 2A is the approval of the brief of action from October 25, 2023. Item 2B, acknowledgement of donation, Kettle Moraine State Forest, the Lapham Peak Unit, UTV. Friends of Lapham Peak are donating $45,776 in the form of a Kubota UTV and attachments, including a broom attachment, snowplow, and salter. This donation will be used to maintain the paved 1.8 mile plantation path trail during the winter months at Lapham Peak, located in Waukesha County, Wisconsin. Item 2C, acknowledgement of the donation. The National Association of State Park Directors donated an outdoor wheelchair valued at $19,500 to Buckhorn State Park in Juneau County, Wisconsin. The outdoor wheelchair will increase accessible opportunities and enhance the overall outdoor recreation experience at the park, including access to the park beach and 4 miles of trails. Item 2D, request that the board authorize a preliminary public hearing and comment period for the statement of scope for board order RR-14-23 for proposed rules affecting chapters NR 700, 708, 714, 722, 724, 725, 726, 727, and 749, related to definitions, notifications, fees, agreements, reports, and procedures for interim action and remedial action, continuing obligations for environmental contamination. Item 2E, requests that the board authorize a preliminary public hearing and comment period for the statement of scope for board order RR 15-23 for proposed rules affecting chapters NR 700, 720, and 722 related to definitions, land use classifications, procedures for identifying environmental standards for soil and soil cleanup standards used to investigate and remediate environmental contamination. Item 2F, requests that the board authorize a preliminary public hearing and comment period for the statement of scope for board order DG 16-23 for proposed rules affecting chapter NR 809 related to control of lead and copper in public drinking water, to be consistent with revisions to the federal lead and copper rule and the federal lead and copper rule improvements. That is the proposed consent agenda. Are there any items that the board would like moved to item number 3 for further discussion? Hearing none, I'd request a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Doug, make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Got a motion to approve from Doug. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second from Todd. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Consent agenda is approved. We have no items under item 3. We'll move to item 4, action items. Item 4A, request that the board adopt emergency board order FR-6-23E, proposed rules affecting chapter NR 47 related to federal funding for the Urban and Community Forestry Grant Program. Laura Buntrock, Urban Forestry Partnership and Policy Specialist. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you, and good morning, Chair Smith, members of the board, and Deputy Secretary Little. My name is Laura Buntrock, and I'm the Partnership and Policy Specialist with the Urban Forestry Program. Today, we're requesting adoption of Emergency Board Order FR-06-23E related to federal funding for the Urban and Community Forestry Grant Program. All right, so here's where we're at in the process. In August, we held a preliminary public hearing on the scope statement, and in September, the board approved that scope statement. Since then, we've been drafting rule language and completing the fiscal estimate. All good? Okay. So for some background, the Urban and Community Forestry Grant Program has been operating since 1993 and competitively awards funding to cities, towns, villages, county governments, tribal governments, and nonprofits to improve urban and community forests across the state. Recent grant recipients include our largest cities like Milwaukee and Madison, as well as rural communities like Hurley and Gays Mills. Earlier this year, the department was allocated $4.875 million of Federal Inflation Reduction Act funds from the Forest Service, and this is a multifold increase to our typical funding levels. There's some requirements of the IRA funding, including that it must be used within 5 years of award. 80% must be competitively subawarded to local entities. The match waiver that the department received for these funds must be passed down to those sub-grant recipients, and 100% of the funds must benefit disadvantaged communities. So we intend to award $4 million of this funding through our grant program. However, the program currently contains restraints that may prevent the department from fully utilizing these monies. Therefore, the purpose of the emergency rule change is to modify current procedures to meet requirements of the IRA funding and to efficiently and equitably disperse these federal dollars to local entities. So our proposed rule revisions include introducing match waivers for grantees, increasing the maximum award amount to $500,000, establishing an advance payment option of no more than 50% to all grantees, allowing for annual reimbursement for multi-year projects, and defining disadvantaged communities and specifying that only projects that benefit disadvantaged communities are eligible to receive these funds. So to give an idea of who may benefit from the IRA funding, this shows our proposed map of disadvantaged communities using a couple of federal equity screening tools. Areas identified as disadvantaged are shown in green, along with the borders of eligible cities, towns, villages, and tribal lands. So we recently submitted this map and our approach to identifying disadvantaged communities to our Forest Service representative for their review and approval, and we're waiting to hear back from them. So this is very much in process. Regarding public input, one member of the public attended our preliminary hearing and provided testimony in support of the scope statement. And the proposed rule changes were also shared with the Wisconsin Urban Forestry Council for their review and feedback. Since this is an emergency rule, we did not complete an economic impact analysis, but we did complete the fiscal estimate. We foresee no negative economic impacts and no negative effects on small businesses. we anticipate positive impacts on urban forestry related businesses such as private nurseries or tree care companies, as they may be hired by grantees to accomplish work under the grants. For next steps, if the rule is adopted today, we would request governor's approval and look for the rule to go into effect in February. The department plans to utilize the emergency rule extension process to request the maximum effective period of 270 days in order to administer the grants. And so this is a really exciting opportunity for the department and for communities to take advantage of this historic federal funding investment in urban and community forests at the local level. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Any questions for Laura? Todd?
It just, you mentioned it was a several, I think you used the term several-fold increase over what you normally have. What would normally be the amount of money you'd have available for these sorts of grants?
So right now, our state funding levels at $700,000 a year.
Okay. Yes, this is great to hear. Another wonderful example of what the Inflation Reduction Act has been bringing back to the state. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Doug?
Thanks, Chair. So disadvantaged communities definition, we don't have one now, or is that a revision of it, and why?
So we got some direction from the Forest Service as to how we would identify disadvantaged communities. But then it was up to states we could take sort of our own approach to that as well with their approval. So we were directed to use the climate and economic justice screening tool. And we've also added the EJ screen tool to come up with that map that was shown today.
So the map is part of the definition, or is there going to be a definition in text, so to speak?
It will be based on those spatial maps, based on those equity screening tools.
Yeah.
And that's where the projects would need to take place on the ground or benefit the people that live in those places.
Thank you.
Paul? Thank you. What is the definition for urban?
Well, for our program, we don't have a set definition of urban. We don't have like a specific size population or density, population density for our program. Really, it's cities, villages, towns, counties, people who want to work on trees in developed areas and want to engage with our program. But we want to reach as many people, communities of all sizes.
Marcy, then Robin?
The change on the waiver of a match, what was the previous match?
Currently, it's a 1-to-1 match.
Okay. And so now it's 100%, it can be 100% grant funding.
Yes, just for the IRA funding, it would be no match required from grantees.
Awesome. Thank you.
Go ahead, Robin.
Two questions, or a question and a comment. Can this funding be combined with your traditional grant funding for a larger award? Is that something that's possible when project might exceed the 500,000, where you could use some of your regular 700,000 funding available to you? And then I was just going to comment that I'm familiar with those environmental justice screening tools, and I think they're really, really effective and well thought out tools. So I feel comfortable using those tools. And then getting back to Doug, if you're out in the state, will you have to look at a map to find out if you're eligible, or will you actually have it listed by township, or can somebody just Google their do a search for their community and know whether or not it's available?
Sure. So I'll speak to your first question. So regarding combining funds, these will be available we're intending for them to be available at a different time from our regular grant program, just so there's not just to minimize confusion amongst our partners as to what funds they're applying for and what are the parameters of that funding. However, somebody could apply for a grant project under the Inflation Reduction Act funding and then seek additional funding through our regular grant program. And then for the map, we would have an interactive map available online, publicly available, that people could look to see if their community
Okay.
is there. And then we will also have a list of eligible entities.
Thank you.
Marcy?
And then I wanted to thank you for my briefing, but also that we also talked about in many of these communities, grant writers are not readily available. So if we can keep the application, first the promotion to make sure word gets out everywhere, and then to keep the grant as simple as possible. I would really appreciate that. I know in our neck of the woods, so I'm sure others would as well.
Yeah, and we are, like we talked about, Marcy, we are going through and we're working from our grant application that we have, but we're revising it and retooling it for this funding opportunity along with our grant guidance document that provides more details and assistance to people who are looking to apply.
Awesome. Thank you.
Other questions for Laura? Okay, hearing none, I guess it's appropriate for a motion and debate if that's desired.
I'd move to approve the emergency rule.
Got a motion to approve from Marcy. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
A second from Paul. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Laura.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Next item is 4B. Request that the board adopt board order FH-13-22 proposed rules affecting chapters NR 19 and 20 related to wild-based harvest regulations. Todd Collish, Fisheries Management Deputy Bureau Director. Welcome, Todd.
Thank you. Yeah, Chair Smith, Deputy Secretary Little, NRB members, thank you for hearing this proposed rule. I'm Todd Collish. I'm the Deputy Bureau Director for DNR Fisheries. Button to hit here. Oh, there we go. All right, so just a brief overview of the timeline here. So I was in front of the Natural Resources Board almost a year ago, in December of 2022, where the NRB approved the scope statement for this particular rule proposal. And now we're here asking the board to consider approving the final draft rule. And so we thought we'd give you folks a summary of and some background information about this particular issue. So this particular issue revolves around the commercial harvest of wild bait fish in the state. And we thought that you might want some information, some background about how many people do this, how many permits are generated. So in any given year, we have about 65 commercial wild bait harvesters in Wisconsin. That number goes up and down, but it's right around 65 every year. And of those 65 commercial harvesters, we issue right around 265 wild bait harvest permits per year. The primary species that these folks are targeting, you can see on the screen, there's chubs, suckers, fathead minnows, mud minnows, dace. These are primarily species that people are using that they're buying at the bait shop to use to catch other fish. So they're bait species. The primary goal of this proposed rule is to require commercial wild bait harvesters to report their catch. Commercial wild bait harvesters are currently not required to report. They are required to record, but they're not required to report it to the DNR. And so that's the primary goal. And this initiative really involves two steps. And this is step one. Step one is to gather additional information about what's currently occurring out there, and then also address some pretty outdated rules, which I'll go through in a little bit. That's step one. Step two is to evaluate potential changes to commercial and personal harvest within VHS affected waters, and I'll get into that in a little bit. Step two involves a much more holistic assessment of our statewide aquatic invasive species and fish disease plan in coordination with any potential changes that we would allow. But we feel that in order to pursue step 2, we have to have appropriate data first. So that's what we're bringing to you today, is step 1. This issue, as with any issue, we try to actively engage as many interested people as we possibly can in this particular issue. And so we began this initiative about 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, and we formed a task team. The task team consisted of members from the Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection, members of Natural Conservation Heritage, members of Department of Natural Resources Fisheries. We had Conservation Congress members on the task team. We also had commercial fishers on the task team. We had 3 commercial fishers. We reached out to the Wisconsin Aquaculture Association, which is the major association that represents these folks. And they recommended 3 people for this team. And so this team worked over the past 2 years to develop options for revising the commercial wild bait harvest rules. The first thing we did was we surveyed all of the folks that currently get commercial bait permits. So in the spring and summer of 2022, we sent a survey to every commercial wild bait harvester that had submitted a permit request in the last 5 years. And we asked them a variety of questions. What do you think about the current rules? What should we do to improve them? What are some of your issues? What are some concerns? We used the results of that survey to develop the foundation for the scope statement that was presented to the Natural Resources Board in December of last year. That scope statement was approved. Once it was approved, the task team went to work again, and we developed a process we developed some draft rules for this step 1. And we also engaged as best as we possibly could the aquaculture community, the commercial wild bait harvest community. We attended Wisconsin Aquaculture Association meetings, and we convened a public meeting in May to gather thoughts and input on the draft rule. And we also convened another public meeting in November, on November 2nd of this year. And that was part of the official rule process that we convened. And we received a variety of comments, and I'll go through some of those comments in subsequent slides. So if the board approves the rule today, it will go to the governor's office and legislative review in the winter of 2023, and potentially the rule will be in effect in the summer of 2024. So there are 5 issues, primary issues revolving around this proposed rule. 4 of them are in the rule and 1 isn't. And I'll get into each and every one of these in subsequent slides. So the first recommended rule change is the permit duration. And this is something that we got a lot of comments from commercial wild bait harvesters. They said that the current rule is that the commercial wild bait harvesters have to submit a permit application every 30 days. So their permit application expires at 30 days. There was rationale and reason for that. In 2007, that was the first time that we observed viral hemorrhagic septicemia VHS in the state. And at the time, we thought that it was appropriate to reevaluate the permits that were granted for wild bait harvest to assess if any changes in the prevalence of VHS throughout the state. However, we believe that this current rule aspect of the rule is no longer needed because what we're recommending is a calendar year permit. So their permit would expire at the end of the calendar year. The DNR retains the authority to rescind or revoke or revise a permit at any time. And if this rule is approved, the commercial wild bait harvesters will have to report their harvest on a monthly basis. And so we feel it's no longer necessary for the permits to expire every 30 days. We are also allowing up to 10 permit amendments per year. One of the comments we got a variety of comments at the November 2nd public hearing. The initial proposal was only 3 amendments per year. The commercial bait harvesters said, this is a fairly large change, and we would like to see more amendments if we want to add species or add locations based on conditions. And so we are requesting allowing 10 amendments per the calendar year for a permit. So this is really the primary focus of this rule proposal. This is the reporting requirements. As I said, commercial wild bait harvesters are not currently required to report their catch, but they are required to record. There's a variety of issues with that. The current specifications for what they are required to record are also out of date. For example, they're required to record a township range section. We would like latitude, longitude for more specificity on exactly where they're catching fish. There's also no mention in the current recording requirements of gear type, gear size, so the mesh size, different things like that. And so those are out of date. So we would like to adjust that. We're also requesting that reports be submitted on the 10th day of the month following the month of harvest. We're allowing mail-in reporting during a transition period, and we will require daily electronic reporting by 2028. Electronic reporting is something that we are moving to in virtually every aspect of commercial fishing guides, charters on the Great Lakes. If we haven't implemented electronic reporting, we are moving in that direction in many facets throughout the fisheries of Wisconsin. We wanted to give a transition time. We heard from commercial fishers that many of them are okay with electronic reporting, but they do have some concerns. They feel that it will take a learning curve. And so we wanted to give this transition period where we will have workshops, we'll have work groups, we'll work with these folks so that they can most efficiently and effectively use technology to report in real time. So this is the third proposal of this rule, this non-standard gear use. So under the current rule, there are a variety of specifications for what standard gear is. So for example, a seine, the standard length for a seine is 35 feet long. The standard width of a dip net is 8 feet wide. If commercial fishers want to use gear that's above those standards, so if they want to use gear that's 40 feet long, or a seine that's 40 feet long, they have to apply for a non-standard gear permit. The way the current permit rule is written is that the department has no authority to adjust those requests. We only have the authority to approve or deny. So if someone requests a usage of a gear that's outside the standards, we can't, like, let's say they request 40 feet, same. We can't say, well, no, we feel 38 is appropriate based on site-specific conditions. We either have to approve it or deny it. And so what we're asking for additional flexibility for the department to apply specific standards based on site-specific criteria, because these folks are collecting fish in a variety of unique environments, streams, ponds, and things like that. So that's the third recommendation in this rule. The fourth recommendation in this rule is what we call white sucker egg take in co-ops. This is a rule relic. We have not used this in years. To give you some background, we used to, over 20 years ago, the department would partner with commercial wild bait harvesters to collect white sucker eggs in streams, and those eggs would be transferred to the private commercial aquaculture facility to raise and feed sport fish that they were raising for stocking. And so they would get a portion of the eggs and we would get a portion of the eggs. And that's why it was called a co-op. We haven't done that in many, many, many years. There's a variety of reasons why we haven't done it. One is there are issues with importing wild eggs into our facilities, and then there's other reasons, but we haven't done this in a long time. But there are still private commercial fishers who would like to do this. And the rules stipulate that it's a co-op, so that we do this in cooperation, but we have no interest in the eggs. So we would like to change the rule from a co-op agreement to a permit. So if folks are interested in harvesting sucker eggs, we would review a permit instead of enter into a cooperative agreement. And so this last topic, so this is not part of the rule, but this came up, these two issues came up frequently in the conversations we had with stakeholders. One request was to allow commercial wild bait harvest in VHS affected waters. In the map that you see on the slide, VHS affected waters are Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, and the Mississippi River, and all the waters connected to those water bodies up to the first impassable fish barrier. So currently there is no commercial harvest in those waters. Folks would like us to consider allowing commercial harvest in those waters. Folks would also like us to consider personal bait harvest in those waters. And we are open. We are 100% open to having those discussions. We will have those discussions, but we feel that we can't properly inform those discussions until we have good information and data on what's currently being harvested, primarily by commercial fishers. And so that's part two. In the task group that I mentioned to you folks, we're meeting in January again. So if this rule is approved, we're meeting in January to start framing and discussing step two. So these two issues will be brought up. Another issue that was brought up by a lot of commercial fishers is they would like to see those standards that I mentioned adjusted to. So 35 feet for seines, 8 feet for divot. Those standards were developed many, many years ago. We believe it's appropriate to reevaluate that. However, we want to have data before we do that. So we will be reevaluating that with additional information and data that we will get if this rule is approved. So no proposed changes at this time for commercial or personal harvest within VHS affected waters. So in summary, we are requesting an extended permit duration, require reporting of bait harvest, non-standard gear use permit modification allowance, white sucker spawning permit. And once again, I can't stress this enough. This is step one. You know, the folks that we've engaged over the past 2 years, they're very passionate about the next step. And if this rule is approved, we've already got a meeting scheduled. We will begin having discussions about step two with all interested stakeholders and partners. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you folks might have.
Are there other questions for Todd? Paul?
I understand that you want the reporting to gather data. How would you use the data to manage minnow population? I don't quite. Has there been a problem that initiated this need for this data?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so we're not 100% sure because we don't have the data, but we do know that we have issues with fish communities and various ecosystems throughout the state. And this will provide additional information to inform us on what the potential reasons for those issues might be. You know, so like if, for example, if the brook trout population isn't doing good in Cedar Creek, and we don't know exactly why, but if we have this information, this is another piece of the puzzle. It may, you know, commercial harvest may impact the brook trout population or it may not, but we don't know. So it's another piece of our puzzle to more appropriately and better manage these public trust resources.
Robin?
Yeah, thank you. I applaud your efforts to keep your user groups engaged in conversations and because things change and it's just good to have that continued dialogue. My question, so with the additional conversations that you're going to have on a number of these issues, you're not suggesting that there would be rule revisions as a result of that, or would that just be those conversations will help guide you as to whether or not you adjust permit requirements, things like that?
Exactly. Yeah. The conversations will help guide what another potential rule proposal may or may not be. We may decide to leave it as it is too, based on the data that we have, based on the data that we gather.
Other questions? Todd, then Marcy?
Yeah, Todd, a couple of questions. In general, I applaud your work here and what you've done and kind of engaging the various interests in the discussion. So how would you characterize where folks are at now with what you're bringing forward? Obviously, there was some desire to see the waters opened up to harvest. I'm just first talk generally about kind of your sense of where at least the committee is relative to this approach.
Yeah, so the task group, and I talked with them the last couple of days and late last week. They're good. They fully understand that this initiative has to be addressed in steps. And so, but there are members of the task group that really want us to see, or really want to see us look at, and we need to, I think it's appropriate. We need to look at whether or not it's appropriate to allow additional harvest in waters where it currently isn't allowed. But we need to do that from a really holistic view of not just VHS. Most of these rules were put into place in 2007, 2008 when VHS, fire hemorrhage, except kind of came out. But since then, as you folks know, we've had a lot more in exotic invasive species and disease in this area, and one of them is invasive carp. And so the map that I showed you that showed the VHS affected area of the Mississippi, that's the same area where invasive carp are. We, in my opinion, we need to be held to a very high standard here in Wisconsin. I think you folks know collaboratively over $100 million last year was spent to keep invasive carp out of the Great Lakes. Wisconsin has both the Mississippi watershed and the Great Lakes watershed. They're right next to each other. And so I think we're held to a pretty high standard. And so I think that, the original premise and foundation that these rules were based on was good with VHS, but we need to incorporate all the recent information and data about exotic and invasive and use that to feed into, whether or not we're going to allow expanded harvest.
Yeah, let's certainly applaud that effort and the data requirement. The old saying goes, you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you are. So all that makes sense to me. Talk a bit about, I'm curious about kind of what is the nature of VHS today in terms of how it is impacting fish species. I remember vividly when it was discovered as Water Division Administrator at that time, and the fear at the time that it could potentially wipe out large sections of our freshwater fish populations. That didn't happen, but kind of how would you describe what VHS does now to various species?
Yeah, and we actually we have a veterinarian on call too. So and I can address that question in general, but and Danielle is, she's up there already. Wow, that's amazing. Holy cow. Okay. I guess
I was ready.
So everybody, this is Danielle Goddard. She's a DNR veterinarian with Fisheries.
Hi, everyone. Todd, do you mind if I just start
great.
this conversation? Thanks, everyone. That was a super great question. And actually, it's a question we get a lot because a lot of people perceive that 2007 was that massive hit and we haven't seen it since. But we do still see it. I don't know, Todd, if you have that slide, perhaps you could show that we still detect it. It's still around. It's affecting a lot of different species, and a lot of different species are very susceptible to it, and they keep adding to the list of species that are susceptible to it. We need to really look at this because being that VHS is still present, our concern is introducing it into any kind of naive population. So I think we have to look really hard at how we're going to address this. But target species that they're susceptible, includes our bait fish species, emerald shiner, fathead minnows, and minnows we know we have, but also target species are big ones like walleye and rainbow trout and brown trout. So I think this is really something, again, as Todd said, we're not closed, but we really need to evaluate this.
Thanks. The last thing I would note, I just think I just feel compelled to note back when this was discovered in 2006, 2007, again, where it was found in the Pacific Northwest, about 80% of herring had been wiped out. But that was in saltwater, so we didn't quite know what was going to happen in freshwater. So a lot of fear at the time, and we were able to get an emergency rule in place in under a month to respond to this very significant threat to the fishery and challenges. I just feel compelled to note for the record today that is impossible under current Wisconsin law. Thanks. No other questions.
Okay, Marcy?
Hard to follow. The move to electronic reporting, we remember some concerns that folks had in the Lake Michigan area. And one of the things that was done was extra assistance for those folks to transition to electronic reporting. Will that be available?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we've also heard concerns, and we learned a lot from the experience that you mentioned too. One of the concerns that we get with electronic reporting too is that, what if we don't have cell signal? And so, the app that we're working to implement this with, you don't have to have cell signal. It's on your phone. And so we intend to implement, very similar framework that we did for Lake Michigan folks, hold workshops, and also go out to their businesses and help them, because everybody's unique, and help people along. And as you can imagine, there's a whole spectrum. Some folks want to implement it as soon as the rules pass, and others we'll work very closely with.
Okay. And if I can follow up, the economic impact, first, I was surprised at how many commercial dealers we have in the state. I just have our favorite bait shop, and that's where you go. But with that, there's no change to the permit fee, or what is the permit fee for a commercial license?
Yeah, good question. So there's two. There are two licenses, a Class A and a Class B. The Class A, and it's based off of retail sales. And so the Class A, if you sell over $2,000, through your wild bait harvest business, the permit's $50. If you sell under $2,000 in retail sales, then the permit's $10. So it's 50 or 10.
Will that be a part of the discussion in phase 2?
Yes.
Thank you.
Doug?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Todd. That's good information. So a couple of my questions were touched on. I might ask for a little bit of more clarification, but so the permit costs are going from a 30-day permit to a year-long permit, correct?
30-day to a year. Yep.
Yeah.
Calendar.
So that cost you just explained in the 30-day permit, was it one fee for the entire year? They just had to renew every 30 days?
That's a great guy. I don't know the answer to that question.
I mean, they weren't paying $2,000,
They only have
$2,000
to,
every 30 days.
they only have to pay once. Yeah. Yeah.
So it won't really change economics moving to a year-long permit on the cost, on the fees from the permits, I guess.
It shouldn't, because they're still, so in the old system, let's say they got a Class A, so they'd spend $50. Regardless of, how many times they renewed it, it was always $50. And then, so, the calendar year one, it's $50 too. So yeah, it would be equivalent.
Yeah, that makes sense. And on the VHS, that Todd is right that it's been an issue since 2007, and there's all sorts of questions, I think, out there from the management communities about impacts and rules and regulations and limitations. So do we know for sure game fish impacts from VHS today? I mean, rainbow trout, brown trout. Does our data show clearly that those VHS water species are being significantly impacted?
Yeah, and Danielle touched on that a little bit, but we intend in step 2 to reassess and reevaluate the things that occurred in 2006 and 2007, as Todd was mentioning. And, you know, what Todd was mentioning, this occurred not just in Wisconsin, it occurred, I was in Michigan Michigan, it was the same exact thing. We in Michigan, we had a huge die-off, thousands of fish in Bud Lake. So it was a big deal. And so we need to reevaluate the data, reassess the information, not just for VHS, but also for all the other exotic invasive species and diseases that the VHS rules have helped to decrease their transport. So that's step 2.
Other questions for Todd? I have one I'd like to ask Todd. Primary gist of this rule is for commercial bait harvest. And you've convinced me it's important that we move forward on this and put ourselves in position to make the next step. An issue that was associated with this, you mentioned earlier in your briefing, and it had to do with personal bait harvest out of infected waters. And an initial draft of the rule that went out had an exception built into it. You got a bunch of feedback, and then the exception was pulled out. And we don't have any public testimony on this, but the board did receive a letter from the Conservation Congress representative that was kind of leading a committee that was dealing with this issue, expressing concern about that and an interest in continuing the discussion to try and find some opportunity to allow personal use of bait on these VHS waters. And you mentioned that there's going to be some continuing discussions as you move into step 2 or step 3. Could you talk a little bit about the thought process and the decision process that led to a draft exception in there and then a decision to pull that back out? I think this is going to be an item that's of interest to a number of people in the public, and it would be nice if we could bring a little more clarity to what happened there and where we're headed in the future.
Absolutely. And I'll start with the future. So the Conservation Congress member that submitted comments on this issue is a valuable member of our task team. He's on our task team. And so we will be meeting with him in January to continue these discussions. And we're looking forward to continuing discussions on this issue. And so the personal bait harvest issue that was included in the draft rule that was submitted prior to the November 2nd public hearing. So the version that we had submitted was to allow personal harvest on VHS affected waters, but you cannot remove any fish from those water bodies. So for example, if you were to buy minnows at a bait shop and bring your bait bucket to a VHS impacted water and you didn't use all those minnows would have to be put into that body of water. They could not be removed. And we felt that, you know, if we are going to pursue something like that, that is something that we feel is important to decrease the odds of transporting exotic invasive species or disease species from the water bodies. So that was the version that was initially drafted. Then we had our public comment period on November 2nd. We received quite a few comments in opposition to the personal bait harvest inclusion in this rule package. Some of the rationale for their comments were, number one is that that would be the only part of the rule that has the potential to increase the threat of transporting species from one body of water to another. Everything else is collecting data or addressing things that are out of date. So that'd be the only thing. And so if we are going to include that, we need to do additional, we need to gather additional data, additional information. Why would we include that and not commercial fish harvest in VHS waters? So that was a big concern. And so because of that concern and because of our 100% commitment to continue to review and assess this issue, we removed it. And we feel that this is the logical step to take. Step one, just get more data, get more information. Step two, use that data, use that information to inform potential proposed rules for personal and commercial harvests in the next step. And so for personal harvest, some examples of some data that we would like to have is if we were to open this up, how many people would potentially be doing it? What's the threat out there? These are some questions that this board will ask if I have to come up. And so I want to make sure that I'm, prepared for those. And so those are the types of things that we will be pursuing in step two, beginning in January.
Well, the concern for reducing the risk of transfer of disease and exotic species is paramount. That's most important. But in hearing your comments earlier that there had been similar requests from the commercial industry to be able to harvest from these waters, and that you were going to look at different ways that might be done and still limit the risk. Is there going to be a parallel discussion on this personal bait harvest as well as you go into the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, we'll be having the two discussions in concert with each other. And like I said, the valuable member from Conservation Congress on our task team is he provides, critical input and expertise in this issue. And so we'll be pursuing these concurrently and together, because that's one of the things that we heard during the November 2nd public hearing too, is that it doesn't make sense to separate one from the other. This is all revolves around one big issue, the exotic invasive species and disease transport through water body to water body. Let's look at everything together.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions of Todd? Hearing none, it's time for a motion.
I will move approval.
Todd moves approval. Do we have a second?
I would second. This is Robin.
Robin seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you, Todd. Got a lot of Todds around here.
Yeah, thank you.
Item 4C, another fisheries item. Request that the board adopt emergency board order FH 1123E, proposed rules affecting chapters NR 20 and 25 related to Lake Superior Cisco and lake trout regulations. Brad Ray, welcome, Brad.
Thank you, Chair Smith, Deputy Secretary Little, and members of the board. My name is Brad Ray, and I'm the Lake Superior Team Supervisor based up in Bayfield. And as was mentioned, I'm here to talk about emergency or request adoption of emergency rule affecting lake trout and Cisco quotas. Timeline of where we are: we started scoping this with preliminary public hearing in September, then the scope statement in October, and here today in December to look for approval of an emergency rule. The Lake Superior quotas, the Cisco quota was established in 2016. And the last change was in 2020 for the 2021 to 2023 year class. The lake trout quota in its current form was established in 1986, and we've basically been changing that every 3 years or as needed. Again, the last change was in 2020 for the 2021 to 2023 cycle. And what we need to do is use the most up-to-date data. So we're going to use data through 2022 to set the quotas. We're already a year behind, so we need it as an emergency rule to get it in place fast. So we have the most up-to-date data as we move through this cycle. Looking at what the Cisco population and harvest has done over the last few years, the figure on the left there shows just a combined modeled abundance of Cisco through time. And you do see that there is a little bit of a decline going over time since the quota was first implemented. The figure on the right there shows the commercial harvest of Cisco, and the horizontal black bars represent the quota for each individual year. You can see we did drastically lower the quota, but the commercial harvest has stayed below that quota over the last few years. The figure on the right is from our partners at the U.S. Geological Survey, and it's an annual forage-based assessment, and it's the density of Cisco year class, age year class. And so you can see there's high bars back in the 80s, and there has not been any high bars since that time, which was the impetus of, that's basically the recruitments, the new individual coming into the population. We hadn't seen recruitment event. That was the impetus to put the quotas in place originally. The figure on the right there is each year's commercial harvest going up and down, and the age breakdown of each of those. And what we can see following through that recruitment is when we see them in that age one survey, we can follow them through time. So that 1998 year class, we were able to follow that through time. The 2003 year class, we were able to follow time. Even these little tiny blips of the 2009 and 2015 year classes, we've been able to follow those through time. And so with that little bit of decline and not seeing a recruitment, you'd say, why are we not drastically lowering the quota again? Well, that's because good news. 2022, the stars aligned and we had a record-setting Cisco recruitment event. And that was noticed just this summer in 2023. And here's pictures from the RV Kai that sampled Lake Superior wide, and see that we were catching plenty of age one Cisco. And so because of that recruitment event, we're recommending to just keep the quota static for the next 2 years, which is a joint quota between us and our tribal partners of just under 1.8 million pounds. The state share is 50% of that at 897,000 pounds. We allocate 850,000 to the targeted season that's going on right now, and 47,000 to incidental catch and assessment and recreational fishing. Switching gears to lake trout, sport harvest has approached the quota during the last cycle. And in 2021, we actually closed the fishery early. We have in the rule mechanisms by Secretary's order that when we approach that sport allocation, that we close that fishery early to prevent over harvest. And we've been close to that the last few years. Commercial harvest has stayed below the allocation that we do. This figure just shows commercial harvest by different year types, and again the horizontal bars are the current quota for each jurisdiction. On top is WI1 east of or west of Bark Point, and then the bottom is the Apostle Islands or WI2 region. So the lake trout population, the figure on the top there is kind of shows that we were seeing a drastic decline, and through our quota setting process and over the last few years, we were able to stop that decline that was happening in the late 2010 or in the 2010s, and start to rebuild that population. This was done by that figure at the bottom is the mortality observed by lake trout, and the black horizontal bar there is our aggressive target limit of mortality. In the last 8 years or so, we've stayed underneath that aggressive target. So the lake trout quota, the state total will be 34,500, and that includes WI1 and WI2. WI1, we're not changing anything in that with this emergency rule. What we are going to do is increase WI2 quota for the state by 18%, which would give the sport fishery 2/3 of that at 15,000 lake trout, and the commercial industry 7,500 lake trout. Along with this rule, we also are working with a long-term process of gear standardization across all of our partners up there, and to put a minimum mesh size on trap nets to minimize the unintentional catch of sublegal whitefish. And so the 4 1/4 inches to put in there to minimize that. It does have an allowance for what's called shoaling twines as the trap net is being lifted, so that they all stay in there and don't get harmed. And so this will help prevent that incidental catch mortality of lake whitefish. Our next steps then are we're requesting today approval of the emergency order, and we'll continue to work towards permanent rules over the next year, and hopefully have permanent rules in place by 2025. This will help us maintain our appropriately managed multi-use fishery, setting new quotas and associated rules. Additional hearings and meetings will be done to discuss the new quotas and potential rule changes that we'll look forward to in the permanent rules. to maintain that sustainability of the Lake Superior ecosystem. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Questions for Brad? Marcy?
I don't think we covered the standardized equipment in my briefing, so do other states have that? Is that consistent with other states?
Yeah, Michigan, we actually modeled that based off of Michigan. Red Cliff had that in their code already, our partner, tribal partner. And so we've been working to get standardized rules within Wisconsin waters. And that's one that we've been working on that the last couple of years. And this is one that we thought, well, there is a reason to go ahead and do it because as an emergency rule, the good thing is it's not going to charge anything. The commercial fishermen are already meeting this. We're just basically putting it so that you can't go there with a smaller mesh size that could potentially catch more fish. When the pot's there, that mesh size, the smaller ones can just swim through.
Oh, okay.
This is the goal.
Thank you. No other questions.
Other questions of Brad? Todd?
Hey, Brad, good to see you.
Good to see you.
I just wanted to note my pleasure at seeing the harvest number go up. I remember a couple, 3 years ago, and we had to close the season early, and never a fun thing to have to do. Is your sense, just based on past, recent past history, et cetera, that we're now with the harvest limits that we've got, we're probably in pretty good shape in terms of not having to close the season early?
That's been our messaging to the public, is that there's less of a chance to close early.
Right. I understand it's, never say never, but
right. The hard part of the recreational fishery is a lot of that is effort. And then the success. And when Craig Hoopman, the commercial board chair, was here, he talked about how great fishing is. Well, if he's seeing great fishing, so are the recreational fishermen. And so there is still potential of hitting that limit. If a bunch of people come up and fish and everybody has success, we still potentially could hit that limit. And so I know some of the charter captains, after we got it out there, said they're booking trips for September, which they have not done in a few years, and maybe pump the brakes. They can go ahead and book those trips, but there's still the possibility. And we don't want to give a false sense of hope that we won't have to close, because we do want to maintain that. And it's just hard to predict what effort it is. With the commercial, we can say, here's what you can catch. And once you're done, you're done. But recreational, it's harder to do, because if we have ice this year, who knows, maybe we won't have any ice up there. And so then that will help too. But if we get a good ice year, harvest is always higher too. So.
Okay. Thanks, Brad.
Yep.
Other questions? I have just one, Brad. It's a little bit of an extension on your comment about the sport fishery. It was interesting to me hearing the commercial report from Craig on how glowing it was. But at the same time, we were reading accounts in the papers about the improvement in the sport fishery, not only in numbers, but the quality of the catch. The fish were coming in much bigger, and they tied it to this greatly expanded forage base of young Cisco out there. So this big hatch of Cisco is having apparently multiple benefits. I can't resist just asking you to comment on that as long as you're here in person.
Right. That was 2022 year class. They were really small in 2022, but that provided a jump start for a lot of the predators. 2023, they're still in that size where the predators are doing well. Typically, Minnesota, they don't have a Lake Michigan. So Minnesota set the state record this year for coho salmon. They're going to get coho salmon in Wisconsin are going to get bigger down by Milwaukee because warmer water. But in Lake Superior, Minnesota was able to set the state record. We've seen the steelhead running up the Brule River as some of the largest sizes that we've ever seen. The lake trout seem to be doing really well, hence that the increase in quota, because we're starting to see the ones from the 2015 year class come to the population now. We expect that there's going to be a huge lake trout recruitment event because this is rippling through. When there's food for them, they're doing well. And so I know Todd at the last meeting wanted that silver bullet to figure out how we can do this every year. We can't control the weather is really what it comes down to, because it seems that's a perfect storm of when that recruitment event's gonna happen is when we have a cold winter and a slow spring warm up, where we still have cold temperatures in June, so that the algae blooms that feed the zooplankton, that feed the Cisco go. So as long as we can figure out how to do that, I think we'll be all right. We're working. There's a lot of the partners who are working on figure that out. But we've been telling sport fishermen they're going to have great years this next year, but be prepared as those Cisco start outgrowing predation, which will start happening next year and definitely by the year after. There could, if we don't get another year class, things will go back to normal. And so living the high life right now on that 22-year class. And the good thing is based off of like the 98-year class, which this is almost twice as big, that fed the commercial industry for 20 plus years. So I say I don't have to worry about Cisco the rest of my career. So
Well, and I think you just help the local economy as well by telling everybody there's.
At what age will the big year class of Cisco start to enter the commercial fishery?
yep, about 3 years old. So that is when they start to, by 4, they're fully recruited into that gear. And that 3 years old is about when they start getting about 15 inches. And there's not too many predators that can eat a 15-inch Cisco. There's still 30, 35-inch lake trout that still can, but they're going to go after the slower swimming smelt at that point than those fast Cisco. And so those will just hang out there and hopefully produce another big year class, having them out there over the next 5 or 10 years. Hopefully we get another, pulse like this would be great, and everything will be great on Lake Superior.
Okay. Any further questions of Brad? All right. I think it's time for a motion.
I move for approval.
Got moved for approval from Paul. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Doug. Any further discussion from the board? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you, Brad. Next item is 4D, scope statement. Request the board approve the statement of scope for board order WM 0523 and conditionally approve the public hearing notice for board order WM 0523 and notice of submittal of proposed rules to the Legislative Council Rules Clearinghouse for proposed rules affecting chapter NR 10 related to elk management. Scott Carroll, Wildlife Regulation Policy Specialist. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Smith, Deputy Secretary Little, and members of the board. I'm here today to ask for approval for a scope statement in relation to our elk management plan. So just a little history here. We came to the board for a preliminary public hearing on this scope statement back in September. And we held the preliminary public hearing, which was required by the Joint Committee for Review of Administrative Rules on October 5th, with no individuals from the public attending. And now we're here today to seek approval for the statement of scope. So just a little background on this, the department is actively working on a elk management plan, and out of that elk management plan, there is the potential for some administrative rule changes. Those changes that we are kind of foreseeing coming out of the plan include new zone boundaries and names for the zone boundaries, season dates. There's a gap in the current season. We're looking to maybe just making it a continuous season, and then adjusting the population goal that's located in the administrative code. So as the work continues on that, we will, once we have approval of the scope statement, we'll begin working on a rule, and we foresee bringing both the rule and the plan to the board sometime in 2024. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions for Scott? Marcy.
First, do we know where the McFarland elk went?
I think it's in Illinois. I think it's in Illinois. That's my
Holy
word.
cow, I hope it went through the toll booth.
Probably a Bears fan.
Then it's not coming back. When we looked at this issue a couple years ago, one of the issues was the participation of a variety of groups. Can you just address how that'll be taken into account this time?
Sure. I think any questions related on like the actual continuing work on the statement of scope would be better addressed by my Bureau Director, Eric Loebner, if that's okay.
Sure.
Sure.
Good morning, Chair Smith, Natural Resources Board members, Deputy Secretary Stephen Little. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I can, interesting that you mentioned the elk that was in McFarland.
Eric, for the record, would you mention your name and position?
Sorry, I
Thank
am
you.
my name is Eric Lobner and I'm the Beard Director for the Wildlife Management Program. It's interesting that you mentioned the elk from McFarland. Unfortunately, it was hit by a semi last evening south of Chicago. Yeah, so just last night, literally as I was sitting there, I got the notice.
Shoot, I'm sorry I asked.
Yeah, that unfortunately happens. It was headed the wrong direction.
It was.
Yeah. So could you repeat your question?
User groups.
Yes, as you know, from a few years ago,
Yeah.
we had heard from organizations that were concerned about participation and involvement. So just who the advisory committee process, outreach,
Yeah,
how
what's been
this is going to go forward.
Yeah, what's been happening since then? So great question. So we've been working very diligently with a whole variety of different partners in that management plan. So as of just yesterday, as a matter of fact, we had a elk advisory committee meeting taking a look at, we went out and met with a wide variety of landowners in that area. We've been working with a lot of our interested partner groups. We did reformulate the elk advisory committee because it became apparent that we were missing some interest groups that had certainly had an interest in elk. So we added 2 new members to the elk committee to provide that whole perspective on the private landowners in that area, specifically the central herd. And now we've been using that refined committee to have further conversations and revisit a whole variety of different things that we had originally identified in the plan, with the goal of bringing that to the board here yet this next year.
Okay, all right, thank you. And all of that's available online, committee meeting notices.
Yep,
and
all
everything.
the obviously the meeting from yesterday will be, it isn't on there yet, but it will be added here shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Eric or Scott?
I would move to approve the scope statement request.
Okay, Marcy moves approval. Do we have a second?
Have a second.
Robin seconds. Any further discussion from the board? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you, Scott. Next item is 4E. Presentation of the 2022 Shikar Safari Club International Wildlife Officer of the Year Award. Matt O'Brien here in place of Casey Krieger. Matt, welcome.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair, Mr. Deputy Secretary, members of the Natural Resources Board. My name's Matt O'Brien, Deputy Chief Warden, Division of Public Safety and Resource Protection, here on behalf of Chief Warden Krieger to present the 2022 Shikar Safari International Wildlife Officer of the Year Award to Brian Nepper. Brian's logged 23 years with the department, starting his career as a conservation warden in the field, up in the Greenwood and Spooner stations. He was promoted to an environmental enforcement investigator position in Eau Claire before being promoted again as the division's Homeland Security Administrator for the last 11 years. It was in that position that he truly showcased his leadership skills, decision-making abilities, and his ability to forge partnerships. In that role, Brian was responsible for our department contributions to the state and local Homeland Security and emergency management missions, as well as the safety and security of DNR personnel and our facilities. He forged those partnerships and he took on a lot of highly complex, seemingly solutionless issues, and he always produced results. In the decade that I've known Brian, I cannot count the number of times of feeling a bit hopeless, sitting down in his office and saying, boy, what are we going to do? And he always maintained a positive attitude. He knew who to start calling. There was nothing that was too big to handle. And it might take us 1 year, it might take us 7 years, but we always found success. Brian was responsible for leading groundbreaking initiatives relating to securing our modernized radio fleet so all of our staff could be safe as they work in the field. He pursued federal port security grants to make sure we've got a modernized boat fleet. Keep an eye on those Cisco up there. And most recently, he led the implementation and deployment of 70 body cameras to our Northeast and Southeast regions. And I can just tell you, boy, oh boy, is that a program to take on something like that. Brian also led workplace safety trainings for all department employees at the DNR. And he was generally available as a 24/7 resource for any staff security issues that came up regarding any of our employees or our facilities. While Brian has protected our natural resources and made Wisconsin a safer place to live, he's also made the Department of Natural Resources a better place to work. I think Brian exemplifies the best of Wisconsin's civil servants, bridge building collaboration, selfless leadership, and relentless innovation. So I'm grateful to Shakara Safari Club for the recognition of Brian's exemplary achievements. Would ask all of you to join me in congratulating Brian for our 2022 award.
Thank you very much. I would say none of that work that Matt talked about happened by just one person. Everything that Matt discussed took a team. It took a lot of teamwork, dedicated people, willing to stay on track. And as I always say, work backwards, figure out what needs to get done and hold yourself accountable by working backwards and making sure you're doing all of the steps to get there. It takes working across the divisions, setting goals, and asking a lot of questions respectfully. So I don't consider myself a super smart person. I know a lot of very smart people that are here in this room. I've just been able to surround myself with those smart people and take advice and listen and try to make good decisions. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm very grateful for this and humbled. Thank you.
Photo with the board chair, Mr. Deputy Secretary.
We have a photo opportunity coming up and we have a break coming up. We have a number of real estate items on the agenda and up next, so I suggest we take our break a little bit early and let's everybody report back by 10:10. We'll renew. Thank you.
What a crazy
That's
idea.
really
And Chandra has got.
We've got 10:10 on the clock. I'll call the board meeting back to order. And I would like to restate something I said before we broke. I mentioned some real estate items. More importantly, it's our practice to take open forum in and around 10 o'clock to enable citizen comment. And if there's no objections to the board, I suggest we jump right to open forum and we take our citizen appearances under that. And then we'll go back to the agenda and pick up the real estate items afterward. So
Agreed.
okay with that?
Mhm.
All right.
Do you need a motion for that or not?
I think we can adjust the sequence of events within the agenda just fine as long as there aren't any objections to it. Thank you. So we'll jump to item 5 under open forum. We have 5 appearances scheduled. First one is Mike Foy from Madison. Topic is chronic wasting disease. Welcome, Mike.
I hope you indulge me. I got this at a DNR Brewers special band night, so I'm gonna wear it. Hello, Chair Smith, Deputy Secretary Little, and new and old members of the Wisconsin Natural Resources Board. My name is Mike Foy. Thank you for letting me speak to you today about what we stand to lose to the unchecked spread of chronic wasting disease across Wisconsin. 50 years ago this fall, my folks bought a small farm in Iowa County to celebrate my mother reaching 5 years cancer-free and to fulfill her lifelong dream to own a little place in the country. That farm has been an important part of our family life ever since. As you know, 22 years ago this fall, the first known CWD positive deer east of the Mississippi were harvested in Dane County. In 2013, the Deer Trustee Report recommended that DNR back away from efforts to control CWD in what was already being called the endemic area of southern Wisconsin, though I object to that, and instead adopt the passive management approach focused on disease monitoring. Now, a decade later, CWD has been detected in wild herds in 44 counties, most recently in Jackson County, where the disease now threatens the continued success of the 8-year effort to restore wild elk to central Wisconsin. It's clear that passive management is not working and should be modified or even abandoned in favor of best management practices adopted by the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, including focused removal of CWD positive animals. Seeking a new approach, at the April 22 spring hearing, the Natural Resources had an advisory question asking whether respondents would support a 2-year DNR pilot project to test whether offering a healthy herds incentive payment to landowners and hunters would increase testing and help reduce prevalence and slow disease spread. The question was supported by over 11,000 respondents, 63% of those expressing an opinion. But the question has not been advanced, with concern as to where the reward money would come from front and center. Last week, as you probably heard, Governor Evers signed a bipartisan bill to invest over $500 million in public funds, that's public funds, to upgrade American Family Field and ensure that the Brewers stay in Milwaukee until at least 2050. Along with an estimated $600 million already spent to finance, build, and maintain the stadium since 1995, it totals over $1 billion of public investment in the Brewers. I'm not an economist, so I don't know if that is a good investment. But as you can see, I'm a Brewers fan, and I'm happy they'll be staying here in Wisconsin. But consider that the deer and deer hunting is worth every bit as much as the Brewers are to Wisconsin, $1 billion or more a year. Yet we invest just a fraction of that to maintain a healthy deer population. I see my time's up. Please consider supporting the Natural Support Advisory question and give it a strong endorsement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions from the board? I admire your multi-purpose hat.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. It works for many things.
Thank you.
Can I, Mike,
Marcy?
you're not off the hook yet.
Oh.
So yes, we had that question and we talked about that. Do you have or have you seen from other organizations an estimate of what a program like that would cost?
Well, it depends on how big you wanted to do the pilot. I think, to do full implementation, there's no question that you would have to have a legislative support in either through the regular budget process or through a special bill like was just done with the brewers. But it's $1 billion a year. I think just to get, the 30,000 sick deer out of the population, which isn't an unheard of number out of 300,000 or so, regularly shot every year. It's just, you got to get the right deer in the right places. And a pilot could be had for as little as $1 million or $2 million. But then to fully implement it, you're talking tens of millions of dollars. But again, what is the value of the resource? And also remember, this is not just spent in southeast Wisconsin. This is every corner of the state, every crossroads tavern, every little supper club, every little sporting goods store, gas station, feed store. It's a big deal, and yet we don't recognize it as that because it doesn't have, the Gold Coast folks all, lobbying for it like the brewers do.
Robin?
So, do you think that, there would be support within the hunting community for a voluntary surcharge onto a hunting license that would contribute towards a program like this? Is there that kind of support?
Yeah, that's a little out of my wheelhouse. That's probably a better question for Eric. But one of their arguments against that is we are doing a service for all the citizens of Wisconsin, and we already pay a license fee. Now you're going to charge us extra, but
Well, it's, I think, voluntary.
right. But it bears consideration. The money has to come from somewhere. What I like about it is that we basically paying ourselves to fix this problem. We're not waiting for a vaccine that will be developed elsewhere and will cost us hundreds of millions of dollars to have access to it if it's ever found to be feasible and able to be delivered. We're paying ourselves, and it's a good start, at least until that day that a vaccine might come and be available and maybe finish the job. But let's get going on it and use our own hunters to help us and landowners to help us get on top of this.
Other questions? Okay, thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much.
Next appearance is Jim Olson from Madison, speaking about invasives caused by ballast systems. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks, Chairman Smith. Deputy Little, member of the board. I'm pleased to be speaking to you again. I'm a lawyer from Madison. I've been a lawyer for 58 years with Lawton and Cates. I'm still working. John Lawton, who hired me and was my mentor, was many years the chairman of this board. My father in 1958 was a member of was appointed to the Wisconsin Conservation Commission, which was what this board used to be known. And after he left the board a number of years later, this board named the Paul J. Olson Wildlife Area after him. So I'm very proud of my connections with DNR. Couple of years, I also, more importantly, probably, have for 50 years owned lake property in Violets County, which I fell in love with my first trip there some 70 years ago. Over the last 2 years, I've been deeply involved in trying to research the issue of enhanced wakes. And I have had many conversations with many people, including many from the DNR, whom I have to say have been very helpful to me. I've talked to many lake owners, legislators, many people to try to find what's going on and what we can do about it. And I'll come right before you right now and say, I don't have a solution. But there are many ideas. There are three places I feel that can deal with it. There's, of course, the legislature, there's a DNR, and there's local control. And I want to talk a little bit about local control. 30.77 gives localities the ability to regulate equipment and usage of these boats. But DNR has an important advisory role in local regulation. Every local ordinance that is proposed has to come before, has to be sent to DNR for their advice. And I'm suggesting two things that DNR could do to advise that would help. First, as far as invasive species goes, the issue is that the ballast tanks that are used in these cannot be fully drained. And that risks the spread of invasives, especially spiny water fleas. And I've talked to DNR wardens. There is a regulation which says that these have to be drained before you go from one lake to another. And the wardens, and I agree with them, say, hey, we can't do this. It's impossible the way that the ordinance is now, it's now written. So what I'm suggesting is that when these ordinances come before DNR, that the DNR person who advise them of the regulation on 19.055 and make suggestions as to how they can deal with it. I see my time. Can I have another minute or two? Okay.
Yep.
That they advise, that they do that about this regulation and suggest that these boats be decontaminated by dealers before they enter the lake. That could go a long ways to try to resolve the issue. The second thing, and this is on the issue of distance from shore. It's been argued that to regulate distance from shore is unenforceable. One of the first things I did was I talked to a man up in Sawyer County 2 years ago who was responsible for some ordinances in Sawyer County, which established a 700-foot buffer zone for the usage of these boats. And I asked him, has it been enforced? And he provided me with a sworn declaration, which I've now provided to Ashley, which you will get. And he says, over 5 years, there has been no problem with enforcement of any of these ordinances. If a person is seen violating one of these ordinances, it is easy for the witness to record the boat number and get the owner's name from the town clerk. A call to the owner has always resolved the problem. In addition, most people voluntarily comply. So these shoreline restrictions are enforceable and can be used. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, and I am probably back talking to you again. But thank you. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to respond.
Thank you, Jim. And we do have a copy of that declaration in front of us.
Okay.
On the local ordinances. Appreciate your input. Yes, you have been here before and we'll see you again, but I would also like to note and thank people that are coming in on this issue. The board as a body has received a lot of information on this, but we have several new members that this issue might be relatively new to them. And going through this material is very helpful to help inform the board and influence our direction in the future. So again, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Were there any questions of Jim? Todd?
No questions, Jim, but I just want to take this moment to just thank you for your comments and for your lifelong advocacy on behalf of our natural resources. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Todd. I appreciate the comments.
Other questions? Okay, thank you, Jim. Our next appearances are scheduled by Zoom. First one is Jeff Meisman from Presque Isle, speaking on proposed wake surfing legislation. Welcome, Jeff.
Good morning, and thank you, Chairman Smith, and thank you, Deputy Secretary Little and the board members for giving me this opportunity to speak. My name is Jeff Meisman. I live in Vilas County. I am a registered professional engineer in the state of Wisconsin, now retired. I volunteer for the DNR Clean Boat, Clean Water program. I'm an inspector. I volunteer for the DNR Citizen Lake Monitoring Program. I check 3 lakes, and I volunteer as a DNR Island Steward. In the last 4 years, I've made over 30 presentations on the impact of inadequate wake surfing regulations on our lakes. Until recently, there was not any state legislation in process. This has changed. Now there are 2 competing bills that would regulate wake surfing, and here's a summary of both bills. Bill number AB 656/SB 680 is proposed by Senator Felskowski and Representative Swearingen. This bill restricts wake sport activities within 200 feet of a shoreline or any water-based structure. Several towns in Wisconsin already have 200 feet no weight restrictions, including my own, and this is far from the distance needed to dissipate the energy created by the 600 horsepower wake boats. Also, this bill prohibits wakeboarding and wake surfing on lakes 50 acres or less. We already have that law, referred to Wisconsin Statute 30.635. Finally, and worst of all, this bill would eliminate the longstanding right of Wisconsin towns to enact a local ordinance more restrictive than statewide law. To me, it appears this bill is not designed to protect our lakes, it's designed to protect the boat manufacturers. The second bill, bill number LRB 5069/1, is proposed by Senator Andre Jacques. This bill will protect Wisconsin lakes and sets standards based on peer-reviewed scientific data about the irreversible damage caused by these wakes. This bill restricts the operation of a motorboat causing a hazardous wake. The bill prohibits such operations on lakes smaller than 1,500 acres. On lakes larger than 1,500 acres, operation less than 700 feet from shoreline would be prohibited. The bill is based on Wisconsin Conservation Congress Citizen Resolutions 63 and 64. Both of these passed state public survey by nearly 70%. This bill does not restrict local ordinances. Senator Jacques' bill protects our lakes because ballasted boats transfer aquatic invasive species. Jim just said it, and I heard a lot of conversation in this meeting about aquatic invasive species and VHS. In addition to prohibiting intentionally amplified wakes on all lakes smaller than 1,500 acres, this bill will protect all but 77 lakes from invasive species from these ballasted boats. According to the bill, you cannot amplify your wake through the use of ballast, so you can't fill and empty your tanks on these smaller lakes. On the remaining 77 lakes, there's additional invasive species management tools like cleaning stations that would be available. And finally, the longstanding right to establish a more restrictive local ordinance is preserved. This legislative bill could eventually become state law. I have reviewed enforcement of 1,500 acres and 700 feet from shore with the DNR, and they support this type of regulation. The criteria used in Senator Jacques' bill, number LRB 5069/1, will protect our lakes. The criteria as written in the Senator Felskowski bill will not protect our lakes without extensive revisions to the bill. I ask that the NRB support the bill that will protect this valuable resource, our lakes. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the lakes.
Any questions for Jeff? I would just note that this issue's been before us many times before, and there was a lot of early frustration that the department wasn't doing enough and could be doing more. I just, at this point in the process, I would like to note that you put considerable effort into this, as well as many other citizens and groups, and to this point, you raised the issue to a level of discussing legislation, and I think that's a major step forward, looking for a good balanced solution to this new form of recreation. So thank you for your effort.
Thank you,
Robert,
Chairman.
go ahead.
So I just have one question, and I think you may have referenced this, but I didn't write it down in my notes. Is there data that shows what a safe distance from shore is? Are there studies that show this? Are there, and could you perhaps send that reference to Ashley? So if we wanted to do some further research, we might have that.
I certainly will, and it's the St. Anthony Falls study that has this data available, done by the University of Minnesota. So I'll gladly send it on to Ashley.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Our next appearance is Carol Phillips, Presque Isle, wake surfing legislation. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you. I'm Carol Phillips. I'm a retired civil engineer. Wake surf boats intentionally make the biggest wake possible so someone can surf without a rope like surfing in the ocean. The boating industry says that if they stay at least 200 feet from shore, the big waves won't have a significant impact on most shores and docks. But the industry's own study shows that the waves coming ashore from surfing 200 feet away are still 16 inches high. So who decided 200 feet from shore is enough? Quoting from the Water Sports Industry Association's website, ocean engineer and naval architect Clifford Gowdy scientifically studied and collected wave energy data on the characteristics of boat wakes. The Water Sports Industry Association analyzed the data to develop recommendations. It's curious that Gowdy didn't analyze his data himself, since he's the expert and they aren't. Those folks at the Water Sports Industry Association determined a wake surfing boat passing a section of shoreline every 9 minutes is less damaging than naturally occurring waves from a 10-mile-an-hour wind. But Gowdy says that gentle breeze would create waves only about 4 inches high. You see waves like that all the time. Does engineer Gowdy's data really show that little wind waves can cause more damage than those huge surf waves? No. Gowdy's tables show that if you add up the energy in hundreds of little wind waves, their total energy is the same as the energy in the wake from one pass of the surf boat. But Gowdy doesn't say the damage is the same, only that the total energy is the same. For example, being pelted with hundreds is one fastball from a major league pitcher, but hundreds of marshmallows won't break your jaw. As Gowdy says, damage depends on what the shore is acclimated to. Most shorelines are acclimated to little wind waves, but not 16-inch waves. Only about 14 lakes in Wisconsin are large enough to generate 16-inch wind waves on the windiest days. Other lakes have never seen wind waves that powerful and can be damaged by surfing 200 feet from shore. 4 southern states have adopted that 200-foot rule that was based on some unnamed boating industry employees' faulty assumption that many marshmallows do just as much damage as one Raleigh Fingers fastball. I hope the DNR will work with the legislature to create laws based on real science. There's another industry study by the National Marine Manufacturers Association. I think I'm probably about out of time, but if you'd like, I can continue another minute. The National Marine Manufacturers Association claims that their study was peer reviewed, but there's no indication of that in the report. In fact, an expert they cite reviewed it later and said, this study fails to provide the material and evidence from which to make any sound conclusion. That report appears in a pay-to-publish online Chinese journal. There are lots of concerns with that. One big concern with wake boats is the propeller angles downward because the boat is in a bow-high position, and it's a huge motor, about 600 horsepower. They claim that the prop wash only goes down 7.5 feet. I'll stop if you want.
If you could bring it to a conclusion, please.
Yeah, they say the prop wash only goes down 7.5 feet, but if you look at their computer model, it actually shows the velocity is still 14 miles an hour at that depth. And 14 miles an hour can move rocks the size of grapefruit. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Any questions from the board? Okay, thank you very much. Our next appearance is Richard Phillips, also from Presque Isle, and also speaking on wake surfing regulation. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you. I'm Richard Phillips. I live on a wonderful Wisconsin lake. I'm here because at age 12, at Boy Scout Camp Namakogan, I fell in love with Wisconsin lakes. I address an aspect of the wake surfing debate that I've not yet heard discussed. The industry's claim that education, not regulation, is the way to go. The industry and wakeboat owners argue that we should not have meaningful regulation. Why? Because education is better. This is false. Why? because the industry will not educate on the indisputable environmental and safety problems of wake surfing. Why? Because if they acknowledge a real problem, they invite regulation. So they're thrown to this defense, deny every problem. They say educate, don't regulate. But the reality of their educational materials is obfuscate, don't educate. How do I know this? Because I have read everything the industry has written in its Wake Responsibly campaign. I've watched every video they have released. Their Wake Responsibly campaign has what they call the 3 pillars: 200 feet from shore, keep your music low, and avoid repeated passes. There is no 4th pillar. You can learn a lot by considering what the industry does not say in their education, which they insist is better than regulation. There's not one word of education about plowing up the lake bottom when operating in water 20 feet or more deep. There's not one word of education about making sure the boat driver can see straight ahead. In many of these boats, which are operated bow high, stern low, the driver cannot see directly ahead. There's not one word of education that when they pass another boat at a distance of 200 feet, their waves are still 16 inches high. Now, 16 inches may sound small to us in this comfortable room, but it's a massive wave, a tsunami on my 300-acre lake. There's not one word of education that their ballast tanks, even after being emptied, still retain 10 to 20 gallons of lake water, and all the invasives entrained in that lake water to be transferred to the next lake they visit. The wake industry advocates that wake surfing is acceptable on lakes as small as 50 acres. But there's not one word of education that if you wake surf on lakes even much larger, one wake surf boat will drive every other boat off that lake. But here's my favorite part of their education. In their latest video released last month, they caution wake surf boat owners against turning and crossing their own wake. They caution that if the wake surf boat owner crosses its own wake, it, and this is a direct quote, could put your boat in a dangerous position with the possibility of passengers being thrown around and water coming into your boat. Why don't they educate on what those waves do to the other 99% of us in much smaller boats? Or educate regarding the impact of their massive waves and downward prop wash on the fish, the lake bottom, aquatic plants, invasives transfer, the shoreline, and loon nests and loon chicks and other creatures, great and small. Education, not regulation, is a false promise. If we love our lakes, we must protect them. Thank you.
From the board? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Thank you. If just a moment, I just wanted to clarify that the department, while legislation is being considered, has been engaged in providing informational testimony and will continue to do so. The department has not taken a position on any particular legislation or any provisions within that legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. That's it for our scheduled appearances. We'll go back to the regular agenda where we left off, and that brings us to item 4F, land exchange, Haven Woods Forest Preserve and Nature Center, Milwaukee County. Jim Lemke. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you. Welcome to you as well. And good morning, Chair Smith and Deputy Secretary Little and the rest of the Natural Resources Board, especially the new members. My name is Jim Lemke. I'm the Real Estate Section Chief. Today I present 2 land exchanges, a sale and an acquisition in front of the board. The first ask involves exchanging lands within Milwaukee County that adjoins the state-owned 237-acre Haven Woods Forest Preserve. Recently, the department was approached by Milwaukee County, who owns Shenecker Park, which adjoins our preserve or the state's preserve. The county-owned park will undergo extensive improvements over the next couple of years. As part of those plans, the county hopes to improve the access into the park, upgrading their baseball fields, update county shop facilities, and create improved parking and upgrade the retention ponds. The parking is part of a shared responsibility with the department as far as public use. As a result of those plans, they would like to exchange 0.34 acres of county lands for 0.34 acres of department lands at the entrance of the Havenwood State Forest Preserve. Department-owned lands will assist the county with their planned improvements, and both properties are equally valued at $8,600. With that, Mr. Chair, I respectfully ask for this board's consideration exchanging 3.4 acres of department state land, determining is no longer needed for conservation use, for 3.4 acres of adjacent county lands.
Are there questions from the board? Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
And you're moving approval, Doug?
Moving approval.
Okay, we've got a motion to approve.
I
Is there a
would second
second?
that.
Robin seconds it. Any further discussion from the board? Hearing none. All those in, Patty, go ahead.
Is it 3.4 or 0.34?
It's 0.34.
Okay, I just want clarity on that. Okay.
Okay, any more questions? Again, we have a motion to approve and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next item, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next ask involves a Bayfield County land exchange within the White River Fishery area between the Patterman family and the department. The Patterman family have owned their property since 1985 and have over time built a home, installed a septic, driveway, only discovered through more accurate surveying and aerial photography that some of those improvements encroach onto DNR state lands. As a resolution between attorneys, the Pattermans have agreed to pay for a survey, which has been concluded, and to deed to the department 0.6383 acres of their land for 0.6887 acres of DNR lands. This is an equal valued exchange as determined by an independent appraiser. And with that, Mr. Chair, I respectfully ask this board's determination or approval to exchange the 0.6887 acre land for 0.6383 acres of the Patterman property. And I should note, Mr. Chair, on the recommendation part of the green sheet, we did have a typo. So it repeats the 0.6887, where in fact, we will accept 0.6383 acres. So I wanted the board to be aware of that.
Thank you for that correction. Are there questions from the board? Hearing none, could we have a motion?
I so move to approve.
Paul moves to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second from Patty. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next item is 4H, Brule River State Forest.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This next ask involves selling 20.36 acres within the Brule River State Forest to the town of Brule in Douglas County. The town approached the department a few years ago, hoping to add additional acreage to their existing adjacent owned lands, hoping to add improvements such as a municipal building and a salt house. The department land falls north of Highway 2 and is a bit disconnected with the larger acreage lands more heavily used by the public within the Brule River State Forest. Lands being sold to the town were appraised at $31,000 and will contain a perpetual deed restriction ensuring outside the footprint of those new pound buildings that the land will be open to the public use and for public use. And with that, Mr. Chair, I respectfully ask for this board's approval of the 20-acre sale to determine that this land is no longer needed for state's use for conservation.
Are there questions of Jim? Paul?
No question. I just want to applaud the DNR for being so reasonable and working with individuals, communities, and making reasonable exchanges so they can utilize the land in an appropriate fashion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by, excuse me, hearing none, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we got a motion to approve from Doug. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
And Paul seconds the motion. Now, is there any further debate from the board? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next item on your list, Jim, is land acquisition and monetary donations, Big Mosquito Lake Wildlife Area.
Thank you once again, Mr. Chair. This final real estate ask involves the potential acquisition in Waukesha County of 30 acres as part of the Big Muskego Wildlife Area. The Heck family has previously sold the department adjoining acres and wish to ensure these additional 30 acres are reserved and preserved in a perpetual conservation setting. The 30 acres adjoins existing DNR lands to the south and to the west, with the western lands providing direct and improved public access to 2,200 acre Big Muskego Lake. The price of the acquisition is $525,000 and is heavily supported by local units of government, as evidenced by $226,000 of the acquisition being donated by the city of Muskego, with the Big Muskego Lake Protection and Rehabilitation District also donating another $50,000 toward this acquisition. $75,000 will be paid by a NACA grant, a wetland conservation grant, with the remaining $174,000 coming from the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Fund. The land will be open to all 5 NBOAs, which means it's open to hunting, fishing, hiking, trapping, and skiing. This acquisition is a continuation of the department's efforts to purchase land in some of the most populated parts of the state, located just 30 miles southwest of Wisconsin, the city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. When I previewed this property, I was amazed at the amount of development in the area, both commercial and residential. This acquisition will not only provide green space enjoyment for public use, but will also protect important bird habitat unique to Big Muskego Lake, which was created back in 1999. This wildlife area provides a variety of opportunities for bird watching, bird nesting, and habitat for wetland and both upland birds, including bald eagles, egrets, and American white pelicans. With that, again, Mr. Chair, I respectfully ask for your approval. I'm available for questions to purchase these 30 acres for the Big Muskego Wildlife Area and to accept the 2 donations, $226,000 being donated by the city of Muskego and $50,000 being donated by the Big Muskego Lake District, Protection Rehabilitation District, and that each donor receive an expression of appreciation as part of the official records of the Natural Resource Board. So with that, Mr. Chair, I again am available for questions.
Are there any questions? Robin, then Todd.
Hi, thank you. So in your, in the information we got, there's a statement under land management that wetland restoration, prairie development would take place in the future with, or it says, with partnership funding similar to Milwaukee Met and City Muskego partnerships. So is there like a friends group? Are there volunteers or other organizations that help make sure that, if there's trail building, other things that it's done in partnership, or is that fully within the DNR's responsibility, or like, how does that work?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking it. And I think with Mr. Chair's permission, I'll ask Eric Loebner to come up with Eric. Eric can address that. Eric is the Bureau Director for the Wildlife Program and is familiar with management plans for that property. I'll defer to the expert if you don't mind.
Thanks, Eric.
Okay. Eric Loebner, Wildlife Program Bureau Director. Welcome again, Eric.
Thank you, Chair Smith. Members of the board, Deputy Secretary Little. Yeah, there's a variety of different opportunities that we have, and that's the beauty of this particular property in the area that it falls in, because the landscape that this particular property is in falls within the McWanago Fox River Focus Area, which is a high priority area for our North American Wetland Conservation Act grants. So in addition to that, so what that means, just for clarity, is that on a national scale, this area has ranked high for these NAWCA grants. And we as an agency have been very successful in that. In addition to that, we work very closely with a wide variety of friends groups, adopt programs. So an adopt program is basically any sort of local individual or group can come forward and adopt a portion of the property. And so we have a number of those activities going on around the state. And certainly this area is a great example of where those occur pretty regularly.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't have any questions for Jim. I just want to note that yesterday he and I had an opportunity to visit the site, take a look at it, and it as he noted, it really is a great opportunity to just build on an already impressive wildlife area. And I was struck by they are growing lots of houses out in that area, and there's one spot on this 30-acre parcel that I think will be a perfect spot to have some additional public access, and you know, right across the street from a new subdivision. I could envision you know, people buying that home, and it'd be pretty sweet to be able to walk across the street to your own you know, 2,200 acre wildlife area. So it's a really nice acquisition and opportunity in a, you know, a very busy part of the state.
Other questions of Jim? Doug?
Thanks, Chair. And more of a comment. I think that, you know, I agree with Todd on his reaction, and I didn't see the property, but in speaking with Jim last week, when he was going to visit and looking at it, you know, it's important for us, I think, to capture these opportunities. One thing that I understood was on the cutout, you see the bump out there with the structures, that's the owner, from my understanding. We worked with them for them to retain that part of the property, so they didn't have to give up the structure area. Additionally, you know, we need to continue to work on areas where we have master plans and priority areas to secure the lands and keep them in conservation for as long as we can.
Okay. Other questions, comments? I have one question for you, Jim.
Sure.
Similar to Todd, looking at, in this case, I didn't get feet on the ground, but I looked at overhead photos that show the, you know, the rapidly developing neighborhood. On one hand, it's a huge challenge to buy conservation lands in areas that are developing rapidly and values are accelerating. So congratulations for bringing this parcel before the board. But along with that, it also looks like it sits very close to some of that development. And either maybe you or Eric could talk a little bit about what the management plans are for the parcel. And in particular, it's open to the 5 nature-based recreation activities, but you've got some buffer areas around occupied buildings and houses that look like they overlap onto the property in a couple of places where it's very narrow, and there are heavily developed, I won't call them in-holdings, it's more of a checkerboard pattern on the east side where you've got isolated state parcels, and it looks like limited opportunity in hooking those up. And I would just like to understand in a little more detail what the management thoughts are about that and how you can get the most out of this particular property.
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that's coming from this board as far as long-term management plans. And I think I have some of those answers, but I do have the expert in the room, Mr. Chair. So if you don't mind, again, Eric, do you mind just addressing that?
Absolutely. Yeah, great question. And you know, that is working in a developing landscape, or even a rural landscape, is always an interesting challenge. Having been a wildlife biologist that worked on a checkerboard of both public and private lands, you know, in proximity to the Horicon Marsh, I can relate to that well. And so a lot of what's going on in this particular property is we're looking at doing a lot of invasive species control, specifically brush that's moving into those blocks of grassland habitat. And I can't underscore the importance of grassland landscapes enough. You know, we frequently talk about the values, and there's great values in our wetlands, but many of those species that utilize those wetlands depend on nesting habitat in proximity to those areas. And that can fluctuate, you know, and it doesn't have to be a large block necessarily. It can just be in proximity to where you can fit it in proximity to the rest of the development on the landscape. So in addition to that brush removal, we're looking at doing warm season grass plantings in that area. We're looking at over the next 3 to 5 years, we want to plant some grass and forb establishment there. So you hear about creating habitat for insects that, you know, pollinators in particular. This is a great opportunity to be able to do that in proximity to these other rural areas in that neighborhood. And so we're going to be looking at doing that. And that always presents some challenges, right? Of when you want to plant a prairie and do pollinators, you frequently want to do a prescribed fire, right? You want to burn those areas because that helps those plant species really develop. What that requires is working with those adjacent landowners to have that conversation about when and how and what does it mean, and ultimately help develop what I'll call some levels of ownership, right? When you work with those neighboring landowners and helping them them into the development of that property, then when you want to do that management down the road, it's a lot easier. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking at. You know, this area is certainly the other parcels that are not this one in particular. There's a lot of oak hickory woodlands. And so trying to build that connection and kind of, there's even talk of some planting of oak on this property to kind of bleed into those areas, have more of a, rather than a hard line, having a more of a gradual transition into those oak uplands. And again, all of those options, we've got a variety of different funding sources. I already mentioned knockoff. Because of the priority of this landscape, I've mentioned that already. It also ranks well with our turkey stamp as well as the Cherish Fund.
Sounds like a wonderful opportunity. Thanks for
got
the
great-
additional background information. on it.
Got great
Before
potential.
Marcy, go ahead.
Eric, so what kind of information is provided to make sure, I mean, when Jim and I spoke last week, the relationship with the local community is really good, and they're very excited to have this property as well. What do you see, because we've had other communities that come back to us later and say, oh, you know, deer hunting doesn't work here, or waterfowl, or what have you. All of this has been shared up front with those communities, I imagine, and will do so in the future.
Yeah, there's a high level of awareness that when we acquire properties, the 5 MBOAs come with it, right? And that is easy sometimes over time for individuals to lose sight of that. So again, what's really important there is that we continue to have that conversation and we continue to value hunting, fishing, trapping, you know, all the 5 MBOAs, skiing opportunities, and again, engage those landowners in proximity to it so that we can continue to share that information and make sure that we maintain that access, because that is key. That's what wildlife areas are for, is to promote and provide these opportunities. And we have other parts of the state where we struggle with, where hunting doesn't occur, or is more limited. We sometimes struggle with maintaining and controlling those populations that can sometimes get a little too high.
Right, because those oak seedlings are pretty tasty.
Candy.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
candy for deer.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Other questions for Jim or Eric? I think we're ready for a motion.
I move for approval.
Paul moves approval. Do we have a second?
I will second.
Todd offers the second. Any further discussion from the board? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, next item on our agenda is item 6, information items, and 6A is lead service line replacements in Wisconsin. Steve Elmore. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Smith and Deputy Secretary Little and the rest of the Natural Resources Board. I'm Steve Elmore. I'm the Director of the Drinking Water and Groundwater Program, and happy to be here today to talk to you about, talk with you about lead service line replacements. Thank you for the invitation. And I will be tag teaming today with Jim Ritchie, also a Director of the Community Financial Assistance Program. So, why are we talking about this here today? There's severe health effects related to ingestion of lead, and there's no safe level of exposure. Its presence in the body can lead to toxic effects, regardless of age, gender, or exposure pathway. So lead in children is a neurological concern, and there's several effects, including ADHD, delayed learning, lower IQ, developmental problems with offspring, and hypertension. And in adults, neuropathy and problems with development and health of bones. So this really can affect the population, and it can be generational. It can extend to future generations. So certainly a concern. Advancing here. Sorry about this. Oh, slides. All right. So the primary concern in drinking water and the bulk of the lead material in our plumbing systems is lead service lines. And in Wisconsin, we have over 147,000 known private side lead service lines and 229,000 private side service lines that have either lead or galvanized material that would require replacement. And just a second on that, galvanized iron pipes that are connected to a lead pipe might be upstream to the galvanized. The galvanized material can be seeded with lead and then release lead over time. So it almost acts like a lead pipe over time. And so those should be replaced, as well as the lead pipes. The numbers of these types of pipes on the utility side are similar to these numbers stated here. And this data all comes from the Public Service Commission and is self-reported by water utilities. And there's a little graphic there that shows what we mean by the private side and the public side. The private side is towards the home from what we call the curb stop, where there's a valve there, usually around where maybe a sidewalk is or where the street curb is, that allows the utility to shut water off to that residence from outside. And the utility the municipality's responsibility comes after that and connects to the water main. But the whole thing here is what we call the service line. All right. So currently, there's a requirement that utilities do a materials inventory and identify what the materials are of these service lines in their distribution system. The department is providing technical assistance currently. We're providing this to small municipal community water systems that have reported having at least one or more lead, galvanized, or unknown, possibly lead service line in their distribution system. The assistance will help these systems meet the requirement that's due October of next year of having a complete inventory of their service lines in their system. 435 community water systems have been offered this free assistance, and currently 180 have accepted. And we are reaching out to those that have not accepted and trying to encourage them to and discuss the offer with them. Assistance will be offered to additional systems beyond these 435 early next year to fill the open slots that we have available. The lead and copper rule, just a little background on that, was first initiated in 1991. We've been regulating the corrosion of plumbing materials in drinking water systems ever since then. And that rule really relies on regular testing of locations in the distribution system for lead and copper. It has corrosion control treatment requirements to limit the corrosiveness of the water, so it doesn't leach lead and copper into the drinking water that we drink. And it does have some requirements for reduction of lead plumbing materials, particularly at small systems. And it does have lead service line replacement requirements in some instances. And it also relies on public education, educate the public about the hazards of lead and how they can protect their families from exposure to lead from drinking water sources. Replacing lead service line lowers lead levels in drinking water. And I'll note it also potentially reduces phosphate discharges, because one of the primary ways that we reduce the corrosiveness of water is by adding an orthophosphate compound that then as we use our water in our homes, gets discharged to the wastewater treatment plant. And it either needs to be then, that phosphate needs to be removed by the wastewater treatment plant, or it'll be discharged into the environment. And I will note, one of the reasons that Wisconsin is so far ahead with removing lead surface lines is this connection. And because we have numerical standards for phosphorus discharges, it promotes communities looking for other solutions rather than adding a phosphorus compound to the water to control corrosion. Some have determined, like the city of Madison, that removing lead surface lines is a better option to reducing the exposure. There are new requirements related to the lead and copper rule. One that came to us in 2021 called the lead and copper rule revisions. And that's includes the requirement to do a materials inventory by October of next year. We're also just last week got a draft of the lead and copper rule improvements. And US EPA has indicated that they will finalize that rule by October of next year, 2024. I'll note, among other things, in the lead and copper rule improvements, it does require full lead surface line replacement over a 10-year period. So communities will have to have a plan and implement that plan over 10 years to replace all lead surface lines in their distribution system. With that, I'll hand it over to Jim Ritchie.
Thank you, Steve. I'd also like to thank Chair Smith, Deputy Secretary Little, and members of the board. I really appreciate the opportunity to join Steve and talk with you today. My name again is Jim Ritchie. I'm the director of the Bureau of Community Financial Assistance. We're the program that administers many of the grant and loan programs at DNR. And we work very closely with the technical programs throughout the department, like the drinking and groundwater program for the lead surface line replacement funding. Wisconsin has really been a leader nationally in providing funding to municipalities for removing and replacing lead service lines. We work very closely with US EPA and regularly have conversations with states around the country who reach out to us to learn a little bit more about our funding efforts. We're really starting our third version of a funding program for lead service lines. And I have just a couple slides, and I'll give a high-level overview of the funding that we have been working on. The first funding program is what we refer to as our 2-year pilot program that was implemented in 2017 and 2018. And I really have to take the opportunity to acknowledge Robin Schmidt, now a board member, but when Robin was with DNR, she was the one who was really responsible for starting this program, for gaining approval from EPA, for developing the program components, reaching out to the municipalities. So thank you, Robin, and I'm excited you get to hear about some of the efforts that have gone on since that. Our pilot program, we were the first state in the country to develop a dedicated lead service line replacement funding program. We were able to utilize $26 million of what we call principal forgiveness. And principal forgiveness, or PF, is essentially funding through our safe drinking water loan program that does not have to be repaid. It's essentially like grant funding. So the pilot program, we, again, were able to get authority to utilize $26 million in principal forgiveness. That was leftover authority from the ERA stimulus, the past big stimulus program in 2010, 2011. And over the 2 years of the pilot program, we were able to award all $26 million to 40 municipalities around the state. And they in turn were able to remove and replace 7,000 lead surface lines. So we're very excited about the interest in the program from the start. Building off of that interest of the pilot program, we were eager to try to be able to offer some additional funding. And that opportunity came with the Water Infrastructure Fund Transfer Program, or the WIFTA program, that was implemented in 2021 and 2022. This was federal legislation that allowed a one-time transfer of funding from our Clean Water Revolving Loan Program, which funds wastewater program projects. It's a little bit bigger program. Transfer funding over to our drinking water program for the purpose of lead service line replacements. We were excited when this opportunity came up. We sought that funding authority immediately. We're a little surprised that we were one of only 8 states in the country that took advantage of this funding opportunity, but we definitely wanted to and build upon that success, that momentum and interest of our pilot program. Over the 2 years of the WIFTA program, we awarded all $63.8 million that was available to 60 municipalities in 2021 and to 72 municipalities in 2022. Many of those municipalities were repeat customers that received funding in both of those years. And those communities were then able to remove an additional 14,000 lead service lines. Again, the pilot program removed 7,000 LSLs. This program removed an additional 14,000. Which brings us to our current version of our funding program, and this is through the federal bipartisan infrastructure law, or bill, as you may have heard it referred to. The bill is the latest federal infrastructure. It devotes a significant amount of federal money through EPA to the states for water infrastructure, including dedicated funding specifically for lead service line replacements. So again, we're very pleased that this opportunity to utilize federal funding came our way. In Wisconsin, this funding is provided through the bill over a 5-year period. The first year we were allocated $48.3 million, and over the total years, the 5 years of the bill program, we expect to receive about $400 million specifically for lead service lines. So a fantastic infusion of funding for this important effort. The bill funding does come with some requirements, some changes, a little bit, make it a little bit more complicated program than our previous versions. In particular, I point out that 49% of the bill funding must go to disadvantaged communities or to projects in disadvantaged census tracts. We heard about this same concept in the urban forestry grants earlier this morning. It's the same principle. So that is a bit of a change. The remainder, the 51% of the funding then is awarded as low interest loans. We're able to keep that interest rate very, very low at 0.25%. We took the first round of applications for the bill funding this year. We received 43 applications requesting $74.5 million. Of this amount, 43.7 million will be allocated as principal forgiveness, again, essentially grant funding, with the remainder as low interest loans. Some summary information then on our funding programs. So over the course of the first 2 programs, we're very pleased that 98 municipalities around the state have received funding, and that's communities all across the state geographically and of all different sizes, small, very small municipalities to the city of Milwaukee. And they collectively have removed over 21,000 lead service lines, which is with that funding, which is a fantastic accomplishment. That's 21,000 households that now have clean drinking water coming into their home. But as we point out, that's still a relatively small percentage, unfortunately, of the total numbers of lead service lines in Wisconsin, as Steve pointed out. We've also tracked the costs of those communities that have used our funding. And the average cost has been $4,220 per lead service line, that's per household. But we've also seen that cost can vary significantly from community to community based on the availability of plumbing contractors, based on the techniques that they use. We've seen costs as low as about $1,500 and as high as almost $10,000 per household. So it's a very expensive effort to remove these, but the average overall has been $4,220. And I point out the last bullet there that the bill funding will not be sufficient to remove all of the known lead service lines in Wisconsin. And Chairman Smith asked us to elaborate a little bit about that. So I have some more details that I can share. That 400 million, again, that we expect through the bill funding, we think we'll be able to remove as many as 95,000 lead service lines. Again, that's a pretty small portion of the total that Steve listed, a range of 147,000 to 229,000 lead service lines. So there will still be a significant need. We estimate the total cost to remove all of the lead service lines. And again, that inventory data is not completely accurate. But that range could be between 620 million and 966 million, almost $1 billion on the high end. That leaves a deficit, of course, with the 400 million that we're receiving with the bill funding, a deficit probably in the range of 220 million to 565 million that will still be needed to remove all of the lead service lines that would remain in the state. I will turn it over to Steve for one additional slide, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Jim. The last thing we wanted to highlight here is the current lead service line accelerator program that Wisconsin's a part of. This is an initiative of US EPA, and Wisconsin's one of 4 states collaborating with EPA on this technical assistance initiative. The other 4 states or the other 3 states include Connecticut, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And in total, EPA's and their contractors are working with 40 communities, 10 in each state, to address barriers and accelerate progress towards lead service line identification and replacement, including helping them apply for funding that Jim outlined here. The accelerator is being currently expanded to 200 communities nationwide. These communities will be likely out, most will be outside of these pilot states here, but they want to take the lessons learned here in Wisconsin and the other states and apply those to other communities nationwide. So we're excited and we're happy to be a partner with EPA to share the lessons learned and move forward with replacing lead service lines. So with that, we're happy to take any questions you have.
Okay. Any questions for Steve or Jim? Paul and then Doug.
I see this addresses the lead problem in municipalities. Is there any estimate on how many lead service lines remain in rural private wells?
Yeah, so lead service or service line materials that may be lead that connect a home to a private well are really unknown by us at this time. But we have looked into that over the years a little bit, and we really think it's not a major issue. We do encourage private well owners to test their well, primarily for nitrate and bacteria, but also a metal scan is also a recommendation to do that once. If you own a house, maybe you're buying a house with a private well, if you don't know the quality of that water, certainly good to test it for bacteria, nitrates, and once for a metal scan. But our general assessment is that's not an issue. And part of that is that it was in the 1960s that lead stopped being used as a plumbing material, and at that, or generally, right? And part of that then is a lot of wells now are much newer than that. They've had to be replaced, and when they're replaced, a new pipe would connect that new well to the home, and they likely wouldn't have used lead material, for that new well, obviously, right, in the replacement.
Well, I think there's a lot of wells out there that are older than 1960.
There
and
are.
having
It's a
removed
general
some
statement.
lead pipe on properties that I've had, I think that there probably is some lead out there. I think there should be some awareness by the public and the DNR of what the actual problem is. I certainly don't know it, but I have found lead pipes and well, in barn situations.
Thank you, Paul. And I've noted your concern. And, part of our challenge is that we don't regulate private wells after they're constructed, really. There's no state regulation. So we're really limited on how to, everything from access to properties to, we can't require sampling there. So we have limited tools to address that problem, but I've noted it and we'll do what we can to address that. And particularly in our work with local health departments, I think that's something that we can work with them on and promote testing, promote, education and awareness. Thank you.
one other.
Go ahead.
Is it possible, instead of having a complete PF of principal forgiveness, that you'd spread that money out and have a cost sharing system? And that would perhaps stimulate, maybe even, if they had skin in the game, consumers would find a more reasonable bids to get the job done, maybe even put a little sweat equity into it if it's some of their own money.
That's a really great question. And actually, I didn't get into that level of detail, but that is what we're doing with the new bill funding. We've, and it's outlined in our intended use plan, our annual work plan. We've actually created 4 tiers of principal forgiveness. Only the most disadvantaged communities get 100% principal forgiveness. The rest get 75, 50, or 25%. The rest is loan money that they have to repay using their own funds.
Excellent.
Exactly.
Hey, Doug, you had a question?
Thanks, Chair. I don't know if the question's for Steve or Jim, but they can pick, I guess. So the same as the urban forestry question on disadvantaged communities and disadvantaged census tracts. And your guys' presentation, there wasn't a map as there was in urban forestry, but how are we determining that? Is there a definition somewhere?
Yep, great question. There is. It's defined by the scoring criteria that we use to rank projects. And our Safe Drinking Water Loan Program has always had that. But with the bill funding, EPA asked us and states to really take a closer look and enhance that. So we did. We in the past looked at median household income of the community and population. We're still doing that, but we've added a number of other things like unemployment rates, population trends, and a couple of other indices that EPA had recommended. So the criteria is really how we are defining disadvantaged communities.
So my follow-up would be, are there any tribal communities included in that?
There are, however, I would also point out that the bill funding has separate tribal allocations for the exact same program that are available directly for the tribes.
And on the private well, Paul's comments reminded me of that. I think I would agree on the age of the wells, and especially if you're looking at disadvantaged communities. Disadvantaged communities just don't have the resources to change their wells when they're aged or rebuilding. And I'm guessing the same, that there's a lot of wells out there, private wells, that are older than that. And in the cost individuals have to bear to sample their own wells beyond things like bacteria, metals, there's an expense with that. Very few people are getting resources to sample their own wells.
Other questions? Robin?
So, yeah, hi, guys. So I just made a couple of points that I wanted to make and also ask for your thoughts. First of all, I learned when I was in this program that the reason states like Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania and others have this problem is because lead is movable. And so when you have ground freezing, you have a higher percentage of this kind of material in your pipes. I don't think the southern states have quite the propensity for using lead in their pipes. So I thought that was really interesting to understand, like, why we have this problem to begin with. Also, one of the concerns that I had even when we started this program is the fact that when you disturb a pipe and you don't remove all of the pipe, then you actually release more lead into the system. So that's why the importance of making sure the private and the publicly owned laterals are all taken care of at one time, so you minimize that additional exposure. But I still am concerned that we're kind of giving a false sense of security, because none of these programs really look at what's going on inside the home. And so you go up into where it's connected in the home, but a lot of homes also continue to have lead pipes, especially older homes, and their faucets and other areas where there's still a source. And so I think I appreciate, like, this is a huge step for getting the lead out, but we're not 100% there until we really continue with the education of homeowners as to what to look for in their own plumbing and making sure they understand the implications of that. Do your outreach, when you deal with communities, do you talk about that at all, or?
Yeah, excellent points, Robin. You're exactly right. And this funding is specific for municipalities. It's for removing both the public and the private side. of the lateral, and it stops at the house at the meter. Essentially, it doesn't cover premise plumbing or interior plumbing. So that is definitely known as a problem in a lot of houses. It was used until not that long ago in plumbing fixtures. So yeah, we definitely take opportunities. There's really good information on the website, but in our conversations with municipalities when we are funding, we definitely talk about that. We get to participate in a lot of webinars and informational seminars that gets to be brought up as well too. But you're right, that is a continuing problem that's even beyond the scope of this funding. Anything else, Steve?
Yeah, I can add a little bit to that. The lead and copper rule does contemplate or try to address, other materials beyond the service line, what might be what we call premise plumbing, as you pointed out, fixtures. Another source can be leaded solder. At some point I think it was in the 1980s, some solder used to connect copper pipes did have a high lead content, and that can be a source of lead too. The one fortunate thing is that the lead and copper rule requires testing in homes, so that the compliance testing is on-site in homes. If there is a problem with those other materials releasing lead into the system, it should get caught with that testing. But there's challenges all around. One thing that the new rule that was just proposed last week does is right now that in-home testing is based on what we call first flush sample. So meaning that the water has to sit stagnant for 6 hours before that sample is taken. Well, that's a good thing because it'll catch stagnant water that may have leached lead into that, but it's only the first liter, so it's really looking at that fixture where you're taking the sample from, and shortly the plumbing really shortly thereafter. The new rule will look at the first liter and the fifth liter, so they'll actually have to take 1 liter, dump out, fill up and dump out 3 more liters, and then take the fifth liter and send that in for analysis. And that fifth liter will tell us more what might be a little bit in that plumbing system, but also like what might been in contact with the service line, right? And so we'll get a better picture of sort of the variety of materials that might be present. What are they contributing to the exposure from drinking water to these lead sources? So that's an improvement. There's also, other things like testing in schools that's going to be required now that will allow or require then the utility to do regular testing of schools to determine if there's exposure there from some of these plumbing materials. So it's not really just about lead service lines. What we talked a lot about today was lead service lines and the replacement. As I pointed out earlier, it really is the major potential source of lead in our drinking water. And so that's why there's so much focus on it. Thanks, Rob.
Patty was next, and then
Patty,
if I
go
could
ahead.
follow that.
Yes, my question, you talked about some municipalities not accepting the help. Why do they not? What's the barrier?
Yeah, well, I mean, some of that's your guess is as good as mine, but I mean, it's a new program, right? And we're working with a well-known consultant that is doing a good job of contacting these folks to let them know what's available. But I mean, just like in your own home, if someone calls you up or sends you something in the mail, you might take a look at it. It might just go straight to the recycling, right? So I think it's going to take repeated contacts, and we're looking at, we have some communications folks that are thinking about this in different ways that we can approach these small utilities. We also have issues of that these small utilities have a lot of different responsibilities. The operator of the water system might also plow streets and cut grass in the community. And so, getting their attention and adequately communicating what this assistance is and why they might want to accept it, I think will take some time. And so we're not done yet. I mean, this was really just the first communications went out in the last, month or two. So we're really early in this program, although we only have till next October. So we'll want to, get those communications done and really make an attempt to work with those communities.
Thank you.
Marcy?
Going along with that, what's the overlap with the health care community? I would, between schools or any hot spots. As I understand it, there's a blood test for children, right? And wouldn't that be a way to find where the problem spots are?
Yes. And some of the information that we do use in our work is blood lead levels that the results of those tests that the health department maintains. We're in close coordination with the Bureau of Environmental and Occupational Health at Department of Health Services, and they've provided that information for us, and we've used it in different analyses and prioritizing where to work. And for instance, in this lead service line accelerator, the 10 communities that were selected for that was one of the factors that was in the matrix for selecting those communities, was the local results of blood lead levels.
Okay, thank you. Can I
Go ahead.
So just give us a picture of how many people address this. I mean, obviously, we're concerned about the number of communities, and I totally agree with you that these people are spread thin. So do we have a regional network? Do we have, how many people do you have out there consulting with the communities?
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of the consultant that we have working on this to work with communities on the materials inventory, I mean, they're bringing several staff to this. I'm not sure off the top of my head how many. But one thing to add to that, though, is they are working with the university and to actually provide some of that assistance. They're using interns from the university students that will be trained and will deliver that assistance. So it was a good way for them to ramp up quickly and get more people on the ground to do the assistance. For our program, we have roughly 125 people in the Bureau of Drinking Water and Groundwater, and about 3/4 of those, so let's say 70-ish, are in the public water supply program, where we're working with public water systems. And we also, I guess some other numbers, we have 7 people in a section here in central office working just on implementing the lead and copper rule now. That's up from 2 like 2 years ago. So we've really ramped up. I mean, it still doesn't sound like huge numbers, but we've ramped up a lot from where we were a few years ago. And there's more in Jim's program working on the finance side to deliver the money to people. The other thing I'll note is we have had some success in engaging in conversations around lead service line replacement by engaging directly with communities, talking to them about, similar to we did today, talking about the hazards and the why they should be concerned about replacing lead service lines, more in a informational and just talking. And so talking with community leaders, so our field staff sitting down with select communities and where they have known lead service lines and talking to them about that, so that they're fully informed and understand, what the situation is.
Yeah. Okay. I'm happy to hear that. I think there's just so many overwhelming, if we mix PFAS in with lead and all of these other things that it does get it overwhelming. And our former board member Sharon Adams hosted in Milwaukee and talked to us about, how much of a struggle this was and the need to bring everything from healthcare and insurance and schools and the science into it. So I'm happy to hear it, and I'm happy to see the update. I would just echo on behalf of everybody who lives in rural areas that I hope that we can continue to talk about how we get either testing, and I don't know if that's the testing from the health issues that would be a better catalyst, or if it's the testing of the water that would be the better catalyst in private wells. But I agree. I mean, I dealt with abandoning wells, and the equipment used in there was definitely of concern. So let's just keep that on the list for future discussions. And then just a side one, seeing your picture with the pile of lead, the same question we have about how you dispose of PFAS after they're filtered. How do you dispose of lead after it's pulled?
Do you want to? So I don't know the answer off the top of my head. It has to be disposed of properly.
Right, but it just struck me like, oh my God, that's a lot of lead coming out of there. So anyway, it's not urgent. It's just curiosity.
Yeah.
I know I've heard conversations about that very issue, and it's the contractor's responsibility, but I know that we've had coordination with our solid waste program about the proper ways to do it. I just can't tell you exactly what that is.
Right. It's like, could we reuse it somehow without causing a problem? Lead pencil.
What?
I think they do
Maybe just
recycle a lot of that, Marcy.
Yeah.
There's a market for it in the scrap materials, salvage yard type stuff they pay
Yeah.
for it.
Interesting.
What they do with it, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a
Right.
good picture. 'Cause
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
makes you think.
A picture's worth 1,000 words, as they say, and I think that one does
Yeah.
tell a big story.
Yeah.
One thing just I wanted to address real quick is that I said we work with the health department. When there is a process when a child does have a high lead level, they go and look for, why is that, right? And they do,
Painted walls.
they look at paint and the child's maybe either childcare or school environment, where is this coming from, right? And one thing they may do is test the water, or look at the plumbing materials in their home or their childcare facility to determine, where is it? So they have those tools available to them, and they are thinking about that and as part of the process. So
And that's at the healthcare, like the community, the health department.
Yep,
level.
that's like
Okay.
health. Yes, that's a process that the health department undertakes when they get notice that a particular child, maybe through their doctor's office got a result that was high.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Steve or Jim? Todd?
I just, good to see you both. I just really wanted to publicly commend, you all and to Robin for your, looking ahead and seeing a real opportunity. It really is impressive. I still, other hats I wear, I still continue to do a lot of Great Lakes related work. And I can tell you that, when I travel to those, I was just in a meeting in Ann Arbor last week, and, somebody just happened to bring up and said, boy, what Wisconsin has been doing on lead service lines really is setting the bar high for the Great Lakes region. And, as Robin alluded to, it's critically important. The stats, just for everybody, of the top 10 states in the nation for lead service lines, 7 of them are Great Lakes states. We are the epicenter of lead service lines, lucky us. And so, but it is going to take a while. It's not going to be cheap, but it's so important. And, we've really kind of set the standard. So, kudos to you all. I was gonna bring this up at board member matters, but since people keep talking about the private wells, I'll just bring it up now. Again, kudos to the department for recently putting out some material and publicity trying to, tell private well owners, get your well tested. And how important that is. Again, private wells were the epicenter for that. Nationally, about 10% of the households in America get their drinking water from private wells. In this state, it's over 30% of the households get their drinking water from private wells. Minnesota, New York, Michigan are all over 25%. And as was alluded to, the problem with this, other than there's lots of regulations when you put a new well in, there's nothing after that. The Clean Water Act doesn't apply. The Safe Drinking Water Act does not apply. You are on your own. There's no requirement to get your well tested. And I have told people for years, I continue to say this, if you live in a rural area, you have a private well, you're not getting it tested, you're likely poisoning yourself. It's really, really important. And to the earlier point, how we figure out how we can, are there ways that we can find a way to get some public resources to enable people with more limited means to be able to test their wells, I think is the next frontier, if you will. So it's a critically important issue, not going to go away anytime soon, but certainly what on the public lead service line front, the department's really a national leader. So thank you.
Other comments, questions? I'd like to just say thanks to Jim and Steve for bringing that additional information I asked for. The point was very simple. I was trying to emphasize, and that is I was really enthused and encouraged by reading the progress and the funding opportunities. And then I sat back and looked at the kind of the big number and said, we're going to make a lot of progress, but we have got a long ways to go. And even with all of these funding opportunities, we've got a 10-year time frame. This might pay for something less than half of what we need to do. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. Robin.
And just to follow up that, when we first started this program, we went around the state and had listening sessions with communities, and there was very little understanding of what those communities had. Many of them said, well, we don't have lead lines. This isn't a program for us. We don't have this problem. So I'm just really glad that that information is getting out there. People are looking at it. There's regulations that, force the issue in terms of testing and analysis, because we knew that it was out there. So thank you for all you've done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
On to item 6B, preliminary results of the 2023 firearm deer season. Jeff Britzel. Deer Program Specialist.
Thank you, Chairman Smith, and good morning, Deputy Secretary Little and members of the Natural Resources Board. And thanks for the invitation to do a quick check-in on the 2023 gun deer season. I look forward to rejoining this group, especially for those of you that haven't been through this. We'll be back in February for a more thorough analysis of all things encompassing of our deer season. But this is a chance to just check in on how the gun season went this year. And I feel I must start by acknowledging that in 2022, it was a real easy year to be the deer guy. The gun season harvest was up 14%. It exceeded expectations. And this year, that's not the case. So I'd say I'm paying my dues, or it's balancing out. But so bottom line is the result of the 9-day gun season this year was a decrease of 17% in the harvest relative to 2022. But it's also below the 5-year average. So we recognize that it did not meet expectations this year. And if we look across the state, this relative drop in harvest relative to last year kind of grades out as you go north and west, to the point where actually some of our southeastern counties and counties along Lake Michigan actually exceeded last year's harvest. But the further west you went and the further north you went, that dropped off to the point where some of our northwest counties were off by 30% or more relative to last year. And we recognize that there was a disparity in that rate of drop off in the northern forest relative to the rest of the state. Much of the state is just running pretty close to the 5-year average, but that's not the case up north. It's also interesting to note that this same experience is playing out with our neighbors in the state of Michigan and Minnesota. In Minnesota, it's more southwest to northeast in terms of their landscape, but this isn't unique to Wisconsin. And we saw this play out in 2019. Actually, the harvest numbers we're seeing this year are almost a mirror image of what we saw in 2019. And again, that happened with the other states. Actually, in 2019, the harvest was even less than what we experienced this year, and it was a 23% drop off from the previous year. The difference between 2019 and this year, though, however, is a bigger portion of that drop in 2019 was made up of the buck harvest, which is really looked at as kind of the barometer and what's more steady. Whereas this year, a bigger portion of this drop was in antlerless deer harvest. Now, in the northern forest, that's probably taken as good news, as that is a reaction to where we're at with deer densities and perhaps the influence of last winter. But it is interesting, and I would say somewhat concerning to note that in the farmland zones, which has been a chronic challenge to adequately harvest antlerless deer, even in those counties where the buck harvest was relatively similar to last year or even up, antlerless harvest declined. So that's really what we're seeing as a driver. So I should say, speaking of the farmland zones, though, for those that feel like it was just things were stacked up against folks and the harvest didn't meet expectations in the farmland zones, we do have additional opportunity in 39 of those counties. The holiday antlerless only firearm season is still coming up. And so we'll see some harvest added to the totals through that. And on a positive note, I'd note that as it relates to, and especially in the farmland zones, chronic wasting disease test sampling, we saw a turnaround time this year increase nicely. So both in the proficiency of our own CWD processing lab, but we also need to share that credit with the Wisconsin Veterinary Diagnostics Lab, who really ramped up their staffing this year to accommodate the anticipated volume this time of the year. So that was good to see. So with that, that's kind of a synopsis of what we've gone through, and I'd be happy to address any questions.
Doug?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jeff, for the preliminary. It's interesting. So do you think the downturn in harvest numbers is more trend based, or is there something we can put our finger on, especially in the north? I mean, the northern hunters are going to blame wolves. So, can you tell us it's more trend related?
Sure. Well, and thanks for that question, Doug. And I'm always, it's an interesting position to be in because I have received a lot of feedback, a lot of anecdotal information, and people, we like to engage and dive into and speculate, what's going on this year. And so I've received a lot of that information. When it comes from me, though, it gets interpreted as, well, that's the agency trying to put a spin on or an excuse as to what might have happened. And I think we have to start out with just acknowledging it's hunting. And part of the magic and mystery that we really don't want to lose in hunting is that we can't explain it all. And that some of this are natural processes. And if we look in the long-term history of hunting, we've seen this play out before. So this isn't anything necessarily new. However, there are some trends that people are aware of that we can connect to what's been happening over the course of time. And a couple of them that we have been talking about a lot in the last year to draw attention to it, to help interpret what's going on, because we have for decades really looked at our harvest data to be strongly connected to the actual deer population. So especially the buck harvest, we used to treat that as, hey, that's the barometer. If it's going up, the population's going up, and vice versa. There's a number of things that have really changed culturally in deer hunting over the last couple of decades that have essentially had the effect of kind of disconnecting that relationship of the actual harvest data with maybe what the population is doing. And one of those things is the simple reality of the aging and declining deer hunter population. This year, that we're always going to make it clear the difference between the average age of a deer hunter and the most common age of a deer hunter. The most common age of a deer hunter in Wisconsin this year is 61 years old. And that simply is an artifact of how the baby boomer generation really was the bulk. And this is not unique to deer hunting, right? This is a microcosm of everything we're experiencing. And as the baby boomer generation is aging out of participating in deer hunting, it's probably disproportionately affecting the northern forest than the rest of the state. And so we have seen this shift in the harvest of the state over a long period of time. And there's a natural reaction to want to fix that or change that or address that. Another part of this shift that's happened slowly over time is hunters' own interest in when and how they want to participate and pursue deer hunting. We've seen a shift away from the 9-day gun season towards really embracing more deer hunting opportunity and hunting earlier in the year. So 20 years ago, 80% of the buck harvest was accomplished during the 9-day gun season. And today that's closer to 60%. So so more, it's not additional deer harvest, but it's a shift of deer harvest outside of the 9-day gun season.
Thank you.
Todd?
Well, Jeff, thanks. That leads into one of the questions I was going to ask, just more in general, was I was curious about. I know in recent years we've seen a increased trend in bow hunter harvest, particularly crossbows. What's the preliminary numbers on that front?
That's a great question, because the archery seasons, the vertical bow and the crossbow seasons, expand over 3 months as opposed to 1 week. So relative to this drop we were talking about in the gun season, we're down in the archery season as well, but it's only about 6.5–7% relative to, so not, and much closer to the 5-year average. We were having, I think, what we would describe as a relatively sluggish archery harvest through the month of October. And again, lots of reasons to second guess or speculate, what might have been behind that or driving that. We saw a tremendous harvest the first week of November this year. I mean, that rut activity, that's really what everybody looks forward to. And I think that also led to some of the disappointment this year. We had an early opener of the gun season, so there was some expectation that there would be more breeding activity still going on, which would increase deer sightings. It appeared, again, this is just anecdotal, that the rut was compressed this year. And really, although every year, even in late seasons, people will talk about, I saw some breeding activity, there were still bucks chasing does. The general sentiment this year was that it was pretty much over before the gun season started.
And then the only other thing, I was watching a show recently from Minnesota talking about the numbers in Minnesota, and as you noted, the harvest was down there, but I as well. But I thought it was interesting that they were fairly, adamant, if you will, that one of the key reasons they pointed to was the harsh winters in the northern part of that state. And obviously we've had that here too in the last couple of years. And that was one of the prime things that they pointed to of why there were fewer deer on the landscape in the northern portion of Minnesota. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts, if you think that applies in the northern part of Wisconsin as well.
Sure. And absolutely. That in and of itself, the condition of the winter is probably the driver. And then there's, of course, ancillary connections to that, because in a severe winter, wolf predation is going to increase. And so it's kind of how much of that is compensatory versus additive. And there's been a lot of discussion about that. So in Wisconsin's history, not being able to look at Minnesota's, I mean, the kind of back-to-back harsh winters we had in 2013 and 14, unless it was 12 and 13, however that works out with the calendar, really did put a dent, in the deer population up north. And we were seeing slow progress and increase. The deer population was slowly growing in the north, as evidenced by the harvest. And then we had a bit of a setback, as I mentioned earlier, in 2019. And then it was slowly starting to come up again as it relates to harvest. And then we've had, I guess what you describe as a setback again this year. And so the winters, if you look historically at those winters that we measure with the winter severity index, and we kind of have a calculated, our northern biologists that have been around long enough to see this play out multiple times, said prior to the gun season, when we get a winter like we had last winter, we can expect a 25% drop off in the harvest the following fall. That's pretty predictable. What's interesting though this year is so that it's not that big of a surprise in the Northwest counties. We did not have that kind of winter in the Northeast counties, and yet we saw that trend play out across the North, even outside of the area that had the winter severity. As it relates to just 2023 to 2022, when you look at this year's harvest to the 5-year average, that's where those Northwest counties pop out. We're further off of the 5-year average harvest in those Northwest counties that were hit by winter last year, whereas the Northeast counties are closer to the 5-year average.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Doug?
Thanks. And one more. So Jeff, the population number is always the one that people are going to watch. So our deer population's too low, it's too high, it's usually too low for everybody. But so in the northern counties, is our population goal pretty close? Because you're talking a big difference between southern and northern in relation to habitat and winter severity index. You're looking at 10, 12 being the right number. I don't know, but are we close to our goal?
Well, so for the past decade, we've really kind of changed the approach in what the goal should be, for county by county in the north. And that was part of the kind of the infrastructure that was designed with the creation of the county deer advisory councils, that there should be some more local ownership in the direction, of the deer population. And so we do see some of that local community variance of opinion even playing out as to whether or not the county's goal should be to allow that population to increase or decrease. And it's, so where we're at relative to where we should be, there's the desires of how it affects the hunting experience. And then there's also the relationship to what is the land's capacity, to support increase. Because even though we provide the opportunity for a county to choose an objective to say, we would like to increase our deer population, if that increase really isn't a reality for a number of reasons, we don't really do service to that community to suggest that's actually a possibility. I think it's more incumbent of us to talk about the reality of this is what is within the realistic scope of what you should expect out of this deer population, and help shape that conversations toward that understanding, as opposed to what we tend to want to do is look back and suggest that it's possible to turn back the clock and say, I remember what it was like 20 years ago, and how do we get back there?
Other questions, comments? Marcy?
Well, I know you'll have a fuller report for us in February, because I have shared concerns about CWD and other things. But we also had very happy hunters. Vernon County, I think, was in the top for our zone for harvests, and we had some success in our family. But your phone has been ringing off the hook. There's been a lot of comment in the newspapers and outdoor news and things like that. How do we facilitate that so it comes into a positive, like what are the avenues for advisory input? What do you work through these next couple of months after the headlines cease?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for that, Marcy, and that perspective of, we do have this, institution established with our county deer advisory councils, and we do kind of want to let the dust settle. to take in the full picture. So as we talked about earlier, you know, the influence of what the archery season is telling us versus the gun season. And then when those groups get together, and of course, there's attention and there'll be coverage. We provide a training session for them. I hope to actually do a couple of them, maybe even some virtual evening sessions with the advisory council members, leading up to our actual in-person meetings, which will happen in April and May. And last year we had regionally in-person sessions with the CDAC members in March. It kind of stretched over the course of the month of late February and into March, where we can take the time with them for a half a day or 5 or 6 hours to really dive into these statistics and the trends, and not only just the deer population numbers, but these harvest trends and hunter. We spent a lot of time, like I said, last year, looking at hunter demographics to help explain and interpret, here's what we're seeing. And I think that actually led to a certain degree up north this past year. We were talking about the severe winter, and we knew we came out of it. And there was an expectation, again, because of how we've normally done it, that there would have been, so we had one county this year that opted to go buck only, in Iron County. In past years, in a similar scenario, it would have probably been not unexpected that maybe 6, 7, or 8 counties would have opted to go buck only this past year. And some people right now are probably saying, see, they should have gone buck only last year. But what we saw in the antlerless harvest trends up north this year were very interesting, because regardless of what the county advisory council opted for, whether it was to reduce their antlerless permits or keep them the same, or even in some cases increase their antlerless permits, they all experienced pretty much the same trend of decline in antlerless harvest. So it was somewhat self-correcting. And what we were sharing with them last year was that whether you consider it unfortunately or just the reality of our hunter number trends up north, that you could put these antlerless permits on the landscape with relatively little risk of overexploitation, simply based on hunter number trends and harvest effort trends. And some of the counties opted to do that. Others, didn't. And so we have this really interesting comparison now that we will be revisiting and talking about this year. And so one of the nice things we've always had, the way our system is built, that even if we get off track a little bit, every year we get the chance to reset. So we'll take this year's harvest, use that information to reset, recalculate what the deer herd must have been going into the season, and then work with the CDACs to make an informed decision, for what we should be doing this fall. And we'll be back to you this summer with that information.
Other questions?
Is there a is there a overall, like with other species, or like what happened with the wolf management plan? We almost got through an agenda without wolf on the agenda, but is there an overall advisory between the organizations?
Sure. So the department has a deer advisory committee,
Okay.
Which has stakeholder representatives on that. And we meet a couple of times a year. One is really to help assess the CDAC process and approve or make alternate recommendations, for the fall season framework. There's also the Conservation Congress has their own deer and elk study committee. I'll actually be meeting with them. They're meeting this weekend on Saturday. And so we will be having a discussion about what just occurred, this fall as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions, comments? I'm going to ask one now, Jeff. I was going to bring this up under board members matters, but it's more timely now.
Okay.
As a immediate reaction to the deer season, there was a lot of angst in the Northwest and across the North, and it generated some meetings that were organized by elected officials. And they attracted quite a crowd. Up in Solon Springs, there was maybe 150, 175 people there. Don't need to go into the details of it, but people were frustrated. They were looking for people to talk to, and they wanted to get a message through to the department. What would be your advice to those people on how to channel their input, now while they're in the mood, it's fresh on their mind? What's the best way to channel that input into the department, and what's the opportunity for change?
Sure. So yeah, thanks for that observation and information on those meetings. And the department is well aware of that. I've established a network over the course of my 30 years of relationships with people all over the state. So I do want people that might be wondering, are we aware of the content and the conversation that happened at that meeting? And I would like to assure people that I am very aware of the content of that conversation, and taking note of that. And people that reach out to me with a genuine attempt to have a constructive conversation, they totally recognize the urge to want to really vent, get some things off of their chest, as it relates to the understandable frustration there was this year. But deep down, they do just want to, see something, better for, and not even so much for themselves, but they are more concerned about the next generation. To, where to take that energy and interest. I do hope that, one of the concerns I've had or disappointments I've had is the County Deer Advisory Council meetings have always been relatively poorly attended. And I've walked out of those meetings oftentimes thinking, gosh, it's too bad more people didn't just take in this conversation that occurred today, because there was really some good exchange back and forth. Yes, some of them can get heated and frustrating. That's been the history of deer management forever. But I would hope perhaps we would would inspire some more people to attend those meetings this spring, because that will help shape the short-term, future. Long-term future yet to be, we have a long history in this state of about once a decade checking in and kind of doing a program review and taking stock. And we're about reaching that decade point. So, people have read, there's been conversations about, hey, is it time, to do that? And we've been talking about that. There's processes to go through to strategically time that out right and with appropriate approvals. And so we're having those conversations. And so we'll see how that plays out over the next year or so.
Okay, I hear the simple message is your mind is open. There's people calling for change and there's opportunity ahead.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
Other questions, comments? Okay, thanks, Jeff. I guess we'll see you in February if not before.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, next item on the agenda, Department Secretaries Matters. I should pause for a minute though, Stephen. I'm sorry. I need to check with the board. We're a little bit past our normal lunchtime. Lunch is available. What's your preference?
Let's finish it up.
Want to plow ahead and wrap it up?
Yep.
Anybody need an immediate break? Okay. Stephen, you're on. Item 7, Department Secretaries Matters.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. First of all, we have some retirement recognitions. Would like to recognize James Robidic from our wildlife management program, retiring after 36 years of service. Secondly, Mr. Michael D. Wagner from our air management program, retiring after 29 years of service with the DNR. I would request a motion to approve those recognitions.
I would move so.
Got a motion to approve from Robin. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Patty. Any discussion?
James is here.
James, please stand up.
Yeah, please.
36 years.
Now he can go write his book of his 36 years of experience.
Any further discussion? Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries.
Thank you very much, Board. Next, just wanted to ask if there are any questions on the real estate transactions.
Okay, hearing none.
5-second rule, sounds good. All right. And then lastly, on behalf of the staff, I just wanted to take this opportunity to wish the board, wish the participants that were here today, as well as those on Zoom, a happy and safe holiday season and a happy new year. So looking forward to seeing you all in 2024. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Okay, number 8, board members matters. Todd Ames.
I already covered the one I was gonna talk about, so I'm good.
Okay, Paul Burr.
I don't have much, just thank you, Bill, for another smooth meeting, and thank you, Stephen, for doing double duty here at the department. Appreciate that. I guess I'd also like to acknowledge Ashley. Thank you very much for this organized approach to a board meeting. I appreciate it very much. That was great work. Thank you again. And I also want to say that I'm going to stop and get the perfect stocking stuffer on my way home, which is park stickers for all my kids. I think that's my wife came up with it as an idea, and I think it's a great idea. So anyway, happy holidays to everyone.
Thank you. Doug?
Thanks, Chair. First, thanks to staff. Still learning here, so we had a bunch of orientations in the last week or two. I don't know, can't count as many, but I think I might have 1 or 2 left even. But thanks, staff does an excellent job. They're time conscious and they save a lot of time for our discussions if we need them. So they've been great. They've been around DNR relationships a long time, and I thought I knew DNR, and didn't know everything. So it was great to see and hear from staff and appreciate how much they're doing. Excellent. The other thing is in the past week, I think it was a week ago, the tribal consultations were held. So as what the tribal leader had on, I had fortune of attending that. Deputy Secretary was there along with staff again, and I think the consultations went really well. I was represented well, questions went well, discussions went good, although I did leave at 12:30. So the feedback was good. So I think it's a testament to the relationship and recognizing that we're not always going to agree, but let's have these issues on the table where we can all talk about them. So I think it went well.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug. Patty.
I just am very appreciative of this experience. I want to thank Ashley personally for being so wonderful and responsive to all my questions and emails, and I really appreciate that. This is a great experience, but I do have a question. What is a 5MBOA? The 5. Someone brought that up.
MBOAs, the nature-based outdoor activities.
A new acronym.
Yep.
Thank you.
Patty, I got an acronym sheet that has it on it.
Yeah. Perfect.
An awesome cheat sheet.
Yeah. So I'm just grateful.
Okay.
And that the DNR has such wonderful staff. It's just the Zooms that we had last week, it was just so informative, and everyone is just really being supportive for the new folks, and I appreciate it.
Well, that orientation process is a hefty dose of information. I'm just glad you're all here today. Hey, Robin.
Yeah, I want to echo, I always like this time of year because it's really a time of not only reflection for the past year, but also an opportunity to really think forward looking about, what we want to see in the next year and kind of set our goals and aspirations. And so I think personally, I just have a lot to be grateful for, and I'm particularly humbled to be sitting in this seat with all of you and being able to participate in these discussions and to hear from all the programs. It's wonderful, and it confirms why Wisconsin is such a great place to live. And then as far as aspirations, I think the areas that I really personally challenge with are, and Todd, you had said this, 30% of our population is on private water supplies, and it's really a challenge for having education without risk in terms of, wanting to know the quality of your water, but not wanting to financially harm yourself by having to report that. I mean, there's just all these challenges associated with that, and I hope that we think about that next year and, really try to be creative and innovative about how we might be able to put some energy into trying to solve that issue. And then the other thing is an opportunity that I feel, and I know the department staff are working on this, but I'd love to hear more about it in terms of as our hunting population ages, there's also a movement from our younger generation to want to buy local, eat local, and harvest local. And so I feel, and also people who want some more ownership with resource management, land management, things like that. So I hope there's opportunities to really generate a new, maybe thought process about it's not just old white guys who are hunting, but it's a whole new generation and experiences for people maybe in more urban areas to be able to connect with the land more as part of their own personal philosophy. So I hope maybe that also we have some opportunities for next year to learn about that and to help incentivize that. So, and happy holidays to all of you, safe travel, and I hope you have healthy family interactions and reunions and all that goes with that.
Thank you. Marcy.
Yes, thank you. I just have one, and it's probably a simple one. One of our presenters, Mr. Meisman, referenced the process for a local lake district or municipality to get advice from the department. So if I could just have a follow-up on that, I would appreciate it. And then those concerns expressed, about the deer harvest and the in our area, the CWD issues, really looking for the future on topics coming up. I sure hope we can address more of that in 2024.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And from my perspective, I had a couple of programmatic topics and we managed to blunder through those as part of the agenda. One, awful lot of attention on the recent deer season, deer numbers, and all the changes. I sense in the public that there's an interest in trying to do something constructive. I think there's people that are opening their minds to changes. Some of them looking back over their shoulder at what they had and wanting to go back to it in terms of regulatory packages, scientific approach, relationships, and all that. So I'm pleased to hear, I guess, from Jeff saying we're kind of coming around on that 10-year cycle, and there's at least consideration for change in the air, and it gives us an opportunity to have those discussions with the public and to give people a chance to influence future directions on deer management. Also, I've gotten quite a bit of traffic on wake surfing. There's a lot of discussions going on behind the scenes about legislation. I'm not part of that. I'm not in the middle of it. It's just people that are trying to keep us as a board engaged and the department engaged in that process. I don't know what'll come out of it, but if legislation is passed, we'll have a more prominent role looking at rule packages to implement whatever comes in legislation. So it's useful for us to stay part of the conversation, I think, at the board level. And I would note for the new members, we've had opportunities in the past. People involved in this have encouraged the board members to get additional information on it. They've put together some information and are willing to share that. So if you have a personal interest in that, that was put out a couple of months ago, and I just wanted to bring that up. If it gets to be a hot spot, in your world, and you want to find out more information, it's out there. There's some products that have been developed, and it just gives you insight. It's a complicated issue, and it affects a lot of people in different ways. And most importantly, I want to join many other people here in thanking people for a very good year and wishing you the very best in the holiday season. Chance to celebrate your family, a chance to relax and recharge, and wish you the best. And I'd ask before you leave, I'd like to just bump into you personally and and give you my own holiday greeting as well. So with that, do we have any other business? If not, a motion to adjourn is appropriate.
I'd move adjournment.
Robin motions to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Todd. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. We're adjourned. Thank you all very much.